Of Tuesday, February 1st, 2022. I call tonight's meeting to order at 7 p.m. and ask everyone to please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, good night, everyone. Good evening, everyone. And wow, I rushed to the end of that meeting. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast live over the Lunenburg Public Access channel, on Facebook Live on the Public Access Facebook page, and will be uploaded to the Lunenburg Access YouTube page within 24 hours after this meeting has concluded. If you would like to participate in tonight's meeting remotely, and we are back to remote participation, not just remote public comment. You can do so by using your computer, smartphone, or tablet and using the Zoom application. Tonight's webinar ID, 909-174-0347. If you don't have a smart device or you're not available to be near one, you can join by phone by dialing 888-475-4499. And once again, the webinar ID is 909-174-0347. The posted agenda lists all the topics which may be discussed at the meeting and are those reasonably anticipated by the chair. Votes may be taken as a result of these discussions. Not all items listed may in fact be discussed, and other items not listed may also be brought up for discussion to the extent permitted by the open meeting law. Okay, open tonight's meeting, and since we have remote members, we have Todd Dwyer and myself here at Town Hall, and if we can just do a roll call of remote members. Mr. Franco, are you there?
I am present, yes.
And Mr. Jeffries?
I am present as well.
Thank you. Okay, we'll open tonight and ask if anybody has any of the board members have any public comment.
None.
I have none.
No.
Seeing none. Any public comment from the public?
Carol Archambault.
Okay. Carol Archambault, you are live.
Thank you very much. I'm Carol Archambault, and my address is 662 Page Street, and I am speaking as the chair of the school committee. My comment this evening has to do with the capital plan. The school committee was disappointed and disagrees with the priority positioning of the air conditioning project at the primary school by the capital planning committee. The primary school was designed with air conditioning. As money became an issue during the build, the air conditioning was placed on the back burner for a later time, although the airflow in the building design depends on it. The months of September, May, and June have been increasingly warm. Educating students to their potential is impossible when temperatures in the classrooms are 90+ degrees with humidity. There are also students with health issues that are triggered by heat. Their right to a free and equal education is compromised. Both staff and students have become ill with heat-related symptoms. During summer programming, our youngest learners are displaced into the middle high school due to the air conditioning there. The furniture, bathrooms, and supplies are not age appropriate. The primary school should be serving our children for the next 30 years. We need to figure this out. If capital plan funds are not the answer, does this qualify for ARPA funds? We need to find a way to get this done. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other public comment from the public? Comment?
No.
Seems to be a chat.
No.
Okay. Okay, seeing none. Do we have any announcements?
The town caucus is March 14th at 6:30 at the middle school, high school auditorium. And the list of positions that will be on the ballot is on the town website as well, and it's been shared on Facebook.
Okay. I will announce also that the survey for the landscape architect's presentation for 30 School Street is open and will remain open through the end of Friday?
Through Friday.
Through Friday. So if you are interested in giving, our comments, giving us comments on that presentation and some of the options from that presentation, please go to the town website. Okay. At 7 p.m., we have our state delegation. I'm very pleased that they are all in attendance here at Town Hall. We have State Representatives Kushmerek and Sina, and we have State Senator John Cronin, who are going to talk to us regarding the FY23 budget priorities and any relative updates on the state budget or any House Senate bills. So I'll start with you, Senator, being the, quote, senior member of the thing. And if you, only because we're live here, if you would come up to the podium and use the microphone. I should have probably put one on the table there.
And I know we want to turn this into a dialogue and have a discussion, but it's a privilege to be before the board tonight. I was here a couple of weeks ago with the rest of the delegation for the Finance Committee meeting, and we had some really good conversations about Chapter 70 and other critical projects around town. I think the town administrator would agree, or the town manager, excuse me, Heather would agree. We've got some good news in the governor's budget. I know Chair Beardmore, I think, is on the line, and the governor's budget had an increase for the town in Chapter 70 funds of about approximately $900,000. So as we start to see the Student Opportunity Act continue to be implemented, that's really good news for the town. And the state of the economy in the Commonwealth continues to be strong. The consensus budget estimate is approximately $48 billion, and I think as we see revenues continue to exceed projections month to month and quarter to quarter, we are looking really good as we turn to the fiscal year 23 budget in the House in April and in the Senate in May, and look forward to a dialogue tonight and a discussion and hearing about things that we can continue to advocate for on Beacon Hill, but appreciate the partnership with Representative Sina, Representative Kushmerek, and the board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Kushmerek.
Chairman Alonso and members of the Select Board and Town Manager Lemieux, thank you for the opportunity to have us here to continue this dialogue. And I think we're privileged as a delegation to have such a receptive and responsive local town government. I know this is not what all of our colleagues enjoy with their local town and municipal government. Certainly appreciate this opportunity to engage in dialogue and really make sure we understand the unique complexities, the challenges, the needs of the locality, and to make sure that we can not only represent you well, but also bring those needs and ensure that they're reflected in both the budget as well as the legislative priorities. And in addition to the consensus revenue projections and kind of profiling and previewing the budget process over the next couple of months ahead, or really the next few months ahead for the legislature, we're coming off the heels of in excess of $4 billion being allocated through the state's ARPA process. More than $600 million dedicated to housing, of which $65 million. I know some of your questions around home ownership and really expanding and reducing the cost of home ownership. And so there's, within that $600 million, there's funding targeted at both reducing rental costs, making rental properties more available, but also to expand first-time home ownership and responsible home ownership across the board. More than $65 million to support programming for home buyers, as well as while you are not a gateway community, you abut two gateway communities, so I expect this will impact the housing stock as well. More than $115 million to help support the creation of new residential home buyer opportunities in neighboring communities. So as you see Leominster and Fitchburg create more single-family homes, that will also help add to the availability and hopefully look to ease some of the some of the crisis around the housing market that we're seeing today. And so I think what you're seeing there in housing is just one category of, there were nearly a dozen different categories of ARPA priorities that the legislature really looked to target through the ARPA disbursements from the state level. And I think what we're seeing there is really looking at the crises that our municipalities are facing and the challenges that we're facing, and looking both from the top down of what can we do to create these programs that will help municipalities and help regions, but then also through looking to partner with municipalities with the funding that you're receiving from that bottom up approach, and looking at how can we then come together and identify any glaring holes or deficiencies between the top-down and the bottom-up approaches. So look forward to working with you and identifying those needs and challenges, and then working to meet them head-on. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Sina.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I want to thank the chair and all the members of the board for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. I also want to thank Heather, the town manager, for all the work that she has been doing for the town. I know some of the issues we're going to be discussing is about housing. I know public transportation wasn't, I think, listed, but that's something we need to work on as well. Education, we need to invest more in not only K through 12, but also college level. We need to make it more affordable. Hopefully make it even free. There's a free college bill that I have co-sponsored as well. And also filed a bill on pre-K or pre-K early education. That's something we need to address at the state level. I think we are falling behind. It makes no sense when just to send one child to school, it's almost equivalent paying for a mortgage or a housing cost. It makes no sense to me. I think that's something we need to address at the state level. And finally, we are in a housing crisis, and I think we need to be creative on how we expand more housing, and doing whatever we can to upgrade our public transit to make it more green. We certainly have so much technology that we can invest, and I know that millionaire's tax is an opportunity for us then to look at creative ways to pay for those topics that we were discussing when it comes to transportation and housing. Yeah, with that, I would love to take some questions, so thank you.
Sure. Before we go to the questions, I said something before we started, and Representative Kuzmarek, you weren't here, and I thanked all our delegation for once again really working as a team together for the interests not only of Lunenburg, which are obviously clearly important to us, but of the region. And all of them are freshmen in their seats, so it's really great that they are working together as well as they are for our benefit and really getting positive results. I want to thank you for that, and thank you for coming here, and also for attending the Finance Committee meeting several weeks ago. I will start by asking, so we don't our goal is not to re-ask the same questions. Are there any updates from what was asked at the Finance Committee that you would like to present to the town tonight before we get into the board asking any other questions?
I would start by just reiterating some of the things.
I'm going to ask, just because the people at home, so I'm sorry we don't have a microphone there, so.
I think I would start by just reiterating things that we said and a dialogue that we're going to continue to have with the town. But I think two things to me came out of that meeting. One is our commitment to continue to advocate and fully fund the Student Opportunity Act. This is the first year, I believe, that the governor has included implementation of the SOA into his budget. But we fully funded it last year in fiscal year 22. And I think as we continue to meet our obligation in the Student Opportunity Act, as we saw in the governor's budget, which was released last week, a $900,000 increase to the town, right, which is big news. And then I think just an awareness that we are in a time when there are more resources than I expect there will be for the next 10 or 20 years. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to work with you at the town level for some of those big projects. And what I took from the finance committee meeting is, and it's not our job to decide, but what is the future for the Ritter? What is the future for the primary school, Passio's, where I went? What is the future for this building? I think there are resources now that we can work with the town at the state level to try to provide to do something, but we're going to need direction, and I think we need leadership in the town to point us one way or the other, and we stand ready to support.
Thank you. I'll start with three things in no particular order. We just heard there's been a discussion in town about the AC and the capital planning committee not funding the AC for the current primary school. And that's a whole process that a 5-member committee went through, but it is obviously important to a lot of people. It's important to me too. It just didn't, as a member of that board, that committee, it just didn't reach the priority to oust anybody else. But it is a remaining issue, and that is one issue that we could use the state's help in with ARPA to help us fund putting that AC in that school. So that would be one item that came up just on tonight's meeting and in the last week. Number 2 is an issue that I have brought up many times in previous delegations, and that is, and it's not a particular concern this particular year in Lunenburg, but it has in the past. I believe personally that the SPED funding at the local level is a disservice to municipalities everywhere. I think the SPED funding, as people move locations within the state, should be shared among the whole state. Like, SPED funding should be a state assisted, not even assisted, it should be a state finance program, not at the local level. So if somebody drops into your locality and into your school district 2 weeks before school starts, we're required to come up with a program and a budget for that, and budgets have been passed months ago. And that makes it very difficult on the municipalities and other people who people move out of all of a sudden have all this free money that they didn't. I mean, that money should really be done at the state level as people move in and out of the state because of the immense cost that some of them bear. And it's not like I want to shun what the costs are, the costs of the costs, and I want to make sure that those students who fall into that program are provided for. I just think the funding mechanism needs to be more fair across the state and shouldn't land on the localities, the individual municipalities. So I'd like to see a discussion about that and how that gets rebudgeted. And then third, from my point of view, is I think the town manager, have you shared with them our budget priorities?
That has to be finalized tonight.
Oh, okay. So we have budget priorities that we're supposed to be finalizing tonight, but they involve some projects that are sizable.
And that has been shared, so.
Okay. So there are infrastructure projects like really aging culverts that need to be replaced for stormwater management, hazardous waste removal from the old primary building at 30 School Street, the help for redevelopment. We have that abandoned gas station on Mass Ave. That has, it's been a bear over years. The town manager has worked tirelessly over her complete tenure here, that every year she has progressed it, and it's due to her energy and credit that we've gotten this far. But we really need final money to get that resolved. And a lot of that has to do with, liability and potential for any environmental hazard that's there. We also have senior center improvements from the capital plan as well. And then from our Parks Commission, there are many parks, if we look at recreation and at youth development in town, that are in need of revamping, and they're revitalizing plans for our Marshall Park, which is right down the road from here, but other parks in the town too. So these are all real solid infrastructure programs that I'm hoping with ARPA and the whole infrastructure bill and everything that we can really get addressed. So those are my concerns. They're not necessarily questions. Of course, I would invite any comments that you might have, but that is mine, and then we'll go to the rest of the board too.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. Certainly, I'm sure we'll be working together to, reach out to some, the agencies to see if there's ways that we can create some of those, get some fundings for those projects. I know I mentioned when we were here that the Department of Transportation has some money aside sometimes that there's projects that needs to be applied for, and I know sometimes that takes 5 or 10 years, but maybe that's not the case with the projects that you mentioned here. Now, the question that I do have, the AC, who's funding that, the school? Where is that coming from?
Well, it's not funded at all right now.
Okay.
So the capital planning committee gets a list of items. This year, there were 31 or 32 items that we had to prioritize. They have all different priorities by the Collins scoring system. They have all different impacts on different buildings and different aspects and different departments in town. That AC was one of them. And it did not reach, at least at the current level from the town manager's budget, the current level of funding, it fell just below that.
Yeah, certainly, let me know how we can be supportive of that. 'Cause certainly, I'm glad that Carol, was it Carol who mentioned,
Yep.
brought those remarks. I commend her for her work on that. I think we certainly need to make sure we're looking at the well-being of all the students. That's how they're gonna be able to succeed in school. And with the project, I mean, we do have an ARPA bill. I believe that we have a second ARPA bill coming, and hopefully we'll be able to address some money, hopefully to get some money for some of these projects. I know $50,000 was approved, right, to help with some of the removal of the waste, right? And I know the $25,000 for the school that was to replace is certainly not enough. It's certainly something we can look at to try to get the remainder. But given those priorities, I would just ask that you send those priorities to all three of us.
Oh, yes.
Because then whomever files in the budget or the ARPA bill that we can co-sponsor, so we're on top of it in terms of communications. That's all I would ask, that when that's final, to send those projects to us.
It'll be final tonight.
Good, okay. I represent 6 towns, and I like to at least file one for each town, and hopefully at least get something. And I know we can't ask for everything, so we try to prioritize. So whatever is the priority, that we can work with the delegation to make sure that that's at least on the top of the list.
Sure. Thank you.
I just asked a follow-up question.
Yeah, Representative seen it before.
Just that, should we still limit it to 4 projects like we've done in the past?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think so. I think that's helpful. And then we can certainly meet and find out what's the best strategy moving forward, because we want to be successful in what we do. We want to be able to get the state funding. We have money, it just needs to be properly allocated. And I certainly want to make sure the town, Lunenburg is getting their fair share, at least from the state. So we'll work together to try to get, some money from either ARPA or the budget, or even sometimes indirectly. It doesn't have to be earmarks related, but there's ways that we can try to go about it and support, funding. Like I said, with the Department of Transportation, for example, there's money that we allocate that can be then applied upon, the state agencies.
Sure.
So,
Thank you.
Happy to build off of that as well. In particular, you really spoke about special education, the rising costs in education. The Student Opportunity Act really tackled your kind of traditional K through 12 schooling, but what it didn't include were things like special education, transportation costs, vocational education, technical education, and then also kind of on the list of on the menu is also higher education. So the Student Opportunity Act was really that once in a generation opportunity to hit the largest piece of a municipal budget. However, I know that there is an increasing appetite to look at these other costs. I think you have to take one at a time, and it took 5 to 7 years to get the Student Opportunity Act really from concept to fruition, and finally funding, which we're pleased to see. But I know Senator Cronin has really done an exceptional job taking a lead on vocational and technical education, and really looking at us as a region and looking at where the opportunities are for us to think about regional vocational and career education. And I think there'll be increasing room to have those conversations, particularly as we look at, deficits in the workforce and across specific trades, everywhere from, from social work to nursing and then certainly labor and trades. And I think there's a lot of work we can do there. So there'll be a need for some additional funding there, but I know certainly special education is one that's been called out as, even during the passage of the Student Opportunity Act, as something that we would need to take a look at, and we'd need to look at, how we apply a longer and more equitable fix for special education. So I can't point to a specific piece of legislation, but I think there is a consensus here that, long-term we need to do something. So again, I can't promise that, there is that bill that we've passed between now and the end of this year, but I know that conversations are certainly taking place, and there is certainly a long-term appetite for how we take a look at the system. With regards to, and I'm going to lump kind of your first and third priorities together, which is, between the AC and the current primary school, as well as your budget priorities for the year ahead. Really being able to, and I know Heather's already had conversations with us and really kind of given us at least a preliminary view at what some of these items could look like. And I think, having a prioritized list is always key, and in particular, a prioritized list in the 5-figure range, or even if the total project cost exceeds, 5 figures, which it often will, telling us where a 5-figure allocation will be helpful to you. There's sometimes costs, projects where, the overall project cost may be well into the 6 or 7 figures. And so if we were to get, a $50,000 earmark, which in some cases is a generous earmark from the legislature, it might not be helpful. There's $50,000 towards a larger project that otherwise would not have been funded by the municipality. That's not helpful to you, and it's probably not where we should have placed our emphasis. So knowing exactly kind of what your priority is and where those opportunities for, again, 5-figure earmarks, I think are helpful for us, and in particular, realizing that there'll be a few different opportunities ahead. While we just passed the largest package of ARPA spending, there's still a second round anticipated in the year ahead of the final ARPA disbursement of state dollars. And I think we'll be targeting larger and thematic statewide, but there will also be an opportunity potentially for earmarks there, as well as the federal infrastructure package. We may have an opportunity. And then lastly, and most importantly, the budget. And so I know you spoke about the culvert, and I think often what we try to do is communicate when we have these lists. I'm fortunate, of many of my colleagues, I have only 2 communities that I represent, and Rep. Sina I know has 6, and Senator Cronin 11. So in communicating themes, it's a little bit easier for me to take a look at my 2 municipalities and communicate a theme. Sometimes it's not always as consistent, just because every community has unique ones. Infrastructure needs, particularly around water, wastewater, and stormwater management. I know certainly Fitchburg and Lunenburg share those issues with the topography that we have here, and the length and miles of road that we have through both agricultural and forested and populated areas. It creates those challenges. So I know as part of ARPA, we really tried to look at where are buckets that we can put funding in that municipalities and DPWs and MassDOT can apply to. So in particular, I'm thinking it's $414 million applied to infrastructure as part of ARPA. A large percentage of that was dedicated specifically to water and wastewater improvements. I expect the infrastructure bill will be similar in that even that $414 million, we know that in some ways it's scratching the surface. And so I fully expect that as part of that infrastructure package, there'll be another additional conversation about creating these buckets of funding that, again, both your town management as well as your DPW can apply for through grants and say, our water department's looking to take care of 3 to 5 miles worth of enhancement or improvements. So I think that Flat Hill Road culvert program, I know that's a significant cost to the town. That may be an opportunity to really target some grants there. And certainly I know the three of us, the delegation stands ready to put together, letters of support and to help you navigate that process too as you look to apply to some of these state funding and programs.
Excellent, thank you. Mr. Dwyer.
Sure. The priorities that we're going to finalize tonight, I share those with the board. But one of the other things that we hadn't mentioned that is unique to a town like Lunenburg is we have limited, some areas of town have very limited internet connectivity, and I know that's going to be one of the things that's targeted in the federal infrastructure bill. So if keeping in mind, when those things come up, opportunities for Lunenburg to expand access for internet as well as improve the infrastructure that we have in that regard would be much appreciated from my point of view.
I will just comment on this. I was involved, I was the Lunenburg representative when they did the mass broadband project, and we were very excited about doing that, and literally nothing came of that in Lunenburg. And I don't know, except for parts of Western Mass, I don't know that much came out of it at all. And that was really a shame because that whole project was designed to do exactly what, Mr. Dwyer just said. So I don't know if that project is completely dead or that the infrastructure is just fallow and nothing's happening with it. It'd be nice if the infrastructure physically is there. It'd be nice to try to resurrect that and get people to manage off that, to provide that last mile. That was the whole intent from the beginning, was to provide the trunk line and then get private enterprise to do the last mile to homes, which never happened in lots of areas, including here. So I'll open it up to the other members. Mr. Franco, do you have anything?
No, I don't have anything to add to what's been said so far. I just want to thank you for being here and having the dialogue.
Okay, Mr. Jeffries.
Yeah, I want to thank all of you guys for being here tonight. It certainly is appreciated. And over the last year or so, I think we've had a good dialogue, especially with Mr. Kushmarek and Senator Crone, I think, and I certainly appreciate that. So I did send over some questions in advance, and so I think that you guys have had the opportunity to look at them. So I'm really not looking for a response tonight as much as me just probably publicly expressing what the questions were. The first is that, I appreciate the comments about home ownership. So, the question that I presented, or the comment, was that 40Bs, and it's more so focused on 40Bs. 40Bs provide affordable housing, but the largest drivers of cost and housing increases are the flood of wealthy investors buying up residential property, and that's driving down home ownership, and it's increasing rental rates, as well as the 1031 exchanges. So now wealth is often accumulated through property. So it seems that a better focus would be on promoting home ownership rather than on promoting what's now becoming unaffordable rentals. So that's one area. I know that there's a big drive to promote housing, but as a property professional, I think that what a lot of people see is that they can't afford to rent. Oftentimes rents are significantly more than mortgages, but due to the lack of availability of product on the market, it's hard to get in. And it seemed as if we shift away from making ultra wealthy people wealthier, because it takes a lot of money to build a 200, 400 unit development that the average person doesn't have. I'd say 95%, 98% of the population cannot afford to do that. And what it does is, again, it takes stock away from people who are looking for an opportunity to invest in their communities. So that's one issue that is of importance to me. Another one is on, excuse me, the situation that we're in with our town hall and Ritter, this is not unique to Lunenburg. This is an issue that many, as you know, many towns and communities have had to face across the Commonwealth. And because of the construction costs, we're all kind of struggling with how we're going to afford this. It would be helpful if there was some form of if there was a state program that was out there to provide some of this funding to help us get through this. Again, it's not a unique need to Lunenburg, but when you're talking about a town hall, and we're getting numbers for community center that we saw at our recent town hall that really just does the functions that we're already doing, doesn't expand anything. It just takes what we're already doing. And we got a $40 million price tag on that. You can't get voters no one's voting for that. I'm not voting for that. And that's where I think it would be helpful for the state to have some form of a program that will kind of offset these costs or supplement the money to help pay for these things. And then the third thing, and kind of today is February the 1st, which is the first day of Black History Month, which has been happening for a while, and is a time to celebrate contributions of people of African American descent to their local, to the United States broadly, or to their local communities. One of the things that Governor Dukakis did back in the 80s, and Governor Well did as a follow-up, was they created these state requirements when it comes to procurement. As I'm sure you're all aware, when it comes to minority-owned businesses and female-owned businesses. And so public contracting already requires everyone to at least make an attempt to reach out to people who are minorities, be they women, whether it's women or whether it's people of color. And the percentages are based on they mirror in many ways the general population at large. Now, contracting is a great thing that is helpful to promote this, but when we look at our municipal employees, and this just isn't unique to Lunenburg, this is across the state, they're mostly white. And we don't have a focus on it doesn't seem as if we have a focus on trying to, let me stop for a second and say, I don't advocate for affirmative action, I don't support it. I'm also not saying that, we need to have some kind of racial quota system. But what I do believe is promoting economic opportunity to people. And part of that is if you're in a disadvantaged situation in an urban area, you probably don't know what a planning use director does. You probably don't know what it takes to become a town manager. And so it's about being able to provide that set of knowledge, those kind of pathways into certain communities, so that way these types of roles become options for them in the future. That to me is a proven pathway to help increase opportunities, and it doesn't just help any particular racial group. It's kind of a good system that becomes available to everyone, and then you have the benefit by having a program in place that benefits everyone, that you really do get everyone. And so it would be nice for there to be some focus on how we create these gateways into municipal roles, which are skilled professional jobs, and how we approach and how we advertise those and partner with our public universities and colleges to, again, create these opportunities across the state, and that way there would be a secondary or even primary benefit to those people who are coming from communities of color. And those are really my only requests. Otherwise, I think that you are going to get our list of priorities from the board, which we will discuss in more detail tonight. And I expect that since we've already had discussions, we'll pass that pretty easily. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jeffries. Senator Cronin.
A lot there. Thank you so much, Mr. Jeffries. So I got three things to respond briefly, and I'm sure my counterparts and colleagues behind me can fill whatever I miss. But just to address those three things: housing, municipal buildings, and the skills gap and creating economic opportunity for, I would just say, everybody here in North Central Mass is something that I know I am passionate about. We have been advocating for multiple lines of effort. To touch first on the housing, again, I think we say ARPA because we talk about it every day, but what the state did is it received over $5 billion in federal funds in the American Rescue Plan in early 2021. And what we did is we spent the first tranche of that, $2.6 billion, in line with, in addition to $1.4 billion in surplus dollars at the end of this December, in December 2021. And those dollars were directed more than $630 million of that package was to housing. So just to kind of hit on the top lines of where we're going to see public investment for specifically housing production. Representative Kushmarek mentioned $115 million for the HDIP program. It's not pointed towards communities like Lunenburg, but it is specifically for gateway cities. And what it is it's to make the margins make sense in places like Fitchburg and places like Leominster. So you can match public investment with private investment to spur housing production that otherwise would not occur. We saw the first new production in downtown Fitchburg, right off Blossom Street, Nick Pelletier's property, in my lifetime, I believe. And that project couldn't have occurred without the HDIP program. That was before we had this historic investment. So that's going to help the housing crunch in the region, I truly believe. Another $115 million for the Commonwealth Builder Program, which is going to increase home ownership and again spur production. So we're taking a targeted approach to get at, I think what you identified, Mr. Jeffries, was we've got an incredible wealth center in Boston. Western expansion has been happening for my entire lifetime. The housing stock has not kept up, and it needs really drastic public investment to spur these projects, which are prohibitively expensive. So we are taking really strong action on that. And there's another $2.3 billion in ARPA funds that the legislature needs to spend by 2024, or allocate by 2024 and spend by 2026. Another hundreds of millions of dollars of that, I can guarantee you, will be committed to housing. And it's incumbent upon us to work with developers to find those projects. Those funds are going to the executive branch in the governor's office right now. And I think when we think of the different pools and buckets of state money that we can advocate for our communities from, we need to be deliberate and strategic and savvy about how we go how we go about that. You don't get what you don't ask for. And so when I say we got to figure out what we're asking for in Lunenburg, because this is the time. If we can get those asks together, I know the gentleman behind me and myself really stand ready and willing to make the case to the executive branch, because there's going to be a lot of resources there. The second on the municipal building, so I have the privilege to chair the municipalities committee in the state senate. We reported S1343 out of committee, or we will report it out of committee this week. And it's an act for Municipal Building Assistance Program and Building Authority. And what that would do is take the model of the Massachusetts School Building Authority and replicated it for projects like this. This is something that all across the Commonwealth, I think select boards, town managers and administrators are asking for. It also is going to require more resources, right? I mean, what we're asking for is state money for what is traditionally local projects. So that's a conversation we're having right now in the state senate. I don't know how optimistic I am that there's going to be $10 million on the table next year or in 3 or 4 years for Lunenburg or for municipalities like ours. And I'll close with just kind of talking about what you talked about, Mr. Jeffries, in closing the skills gap. Something I'm very passionate about. We've got 3 nascent programs here in North Central Massachusetts that I would like to see Lunenburg more involved in, and there's going to be more resources directed to, and I would love to do everything I can to support at the state level. The first is the early college program. So the early college program started in Fitchburg and Leominster. They exist in Gardner. They're expanding next year to Air Shirley. And if there is a parent at home with a 13 or 14-year-old right now, I could save you about $100,000. But we had a student from Gardner High School this year graduate with an associate's degree the day before they graduated from high school. So the early college program gets juniors and seniors at high schools, partnered with Mount Wachusett Community College, and gets them taking classes at Mount Wachusett and earning credits building towards an associate's degree. it is an incredible opportunity for first-generation college students. What the early data that we're seeing is that a student that participates in one of these programs has more than twice the chance not only to matriculate to a four-year college, but to successfully graduate. So these are really good investments. These are programs that have started in the last 5 years that I really believe in. We doubled the funding for this in the state budget. We committed more funding to it in ARPA, and so it's another opportunity where there is state investment coming, and I would love to see Lunenburg get involved in the years to come in programs like that. The second is VocaTech. I got the thing I'm most proud of in my short time in the state Senate is I included a budget line item for innovation pathways, which are work-based learning experiences that are regionally aligned to the labor market in comprehensive high schools. So there's an advanced manufacturing innovation pathway at Fitchburg High School and Gardner High School, and kids are getting in-class instructions on robotics and how to program things that employers out in the job market in our advanced manufacturing sector need in those skills. And then they go out from the classroom and spend 10 hours a week or 15 hours a week with employers. And so kids, especially kids who are not able to gain access to a Chapter 74 program or Mount Wachusett Community College, that's a way we're expanding access to work-based learning and giving kids the skills that our employers need in the region and that our economy really needs to grow. I am unhappy right now with the access that kids from all across the state have to our vocational schools. There are selective admission standards that right now I believe keep the kids who need it the most out, including students of color, including economically disadvantaged students, including students who are English language learners. I've got a bill to fix that. It got reported out of or it will hopefully, knock on wood, be reported out of the Education Committee, and that's something I'm going to continue to fight for, and on the other hand, continue to expand access to those Chapter 74 programs and vocational learning opportunities. And I'm sure Mike Kushmarek behind me or Dan Cena can talk about the Future Educator Academy at Fitchburg High School, and they know more about it than I do, but it's a nascent program at Fitchburg State. And it's a partnership with Fitchburg Public Schools, where more than 70% of the student population of Fitchburg Public Schools are students of color, and less than 10% of the faculty identify as from that population. So there is a partnership that is going to go into effect next year between Fitchburg State and the public schools to get juniors and seniors and get them college credits and get them on a pathway to not just become educators, but to go to Fitchburg State, get a degree, get hands-on training, and then return to Fitchburg Public Schools as a teacher. So across those three things, early college, innovation pathways, Future Educator Academy, those are things that are happening in North Central that the three of us are intimately involved with, and that I really hope we can work with the board, the school system here in Lunenburg, and the rest of the community to implement for our kids.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
And I can speak a little more to the specifics, so I think Senator Cronin described it quite well, the educator diversity pipeline. And, and really, we're seeing across almost the entire workforce right now, worker shortages. And, it's across healthcare, biotechnology, the skilled workforce, labor and trade. You name an industry, and you're pretty much going to find an industry looking for workers. And I think there's a few workforces that are particularly challenged right now, and that is education is really among the most challenged in trying to recruit new teachers into the workforce, get them through the pipeline, and we know that doesn't happen overnight. Any piece of legislation we pass, any kind of initiative we start or pilot, it's at least 4 years through a bachelor's degree program. It's certification and a master's degree program as well that will be required early on. And so we know we need to start right away. And so I think we're seeing two different efforts, and similarly to what I talked about earlier in terms of funding through some of the federal dollars of top down and bottom up. So the legislature is looking at the Teacher Diversity Act. This was introduced by the chair of the Joint Committee on Education, Alice Peisch, and at the real heart of this bill, it's looking at what are the barriers that keep our students of color, particularly our students of color who are already enrolled in college degree and bachelor degree awarding programs, from actually entering the classroom, and realizing that across the board, we have a number of students who are completing their degree in education, they're completing their student teaching, and in some cases, their qualitative analysis by student teacher supervisors are saying, these are some of the best students we've ever seen, and then they're failing on this standardized test. And so it's not just this single test that this piece of legislation looks at, but that's for the sake of explanation. It's looking at these barriers of where do we lose students along the way when we know they're going to be good. They do well in school, in their bachelor degree program, and they do well in their student teaching, but somehow we're not getting them actually into the classroom. And how do we identify those different barriers and stutter steps along the way? And how do we break those down and ensure that we can get those students who 4 years prior, when they were graduating from high school, said, this is the field I want to be in, this is my dream. How do we ensure that they actually fulfill that dream, get into the classroom, and make a difference right there? And that's across the board. But we know that in particular, there are many barriers that are keeping our students of color from actually entering the classroom, and we know that students learn better when they learn from teachers who look like and have experienced similar life experience to them. There's been numerous studies on that. So that's a piece of state legislation that we're looking at, and again, introduced by the chair of the Joint Committee on Education. So I think there's some really promising potential there. And then we look at district-specific efforts, just like Senator Cronin was detailing. This was an initiative by the high school, the Central Superintendent's Office at Fitchburg Public Schools, and in conjunction with Fitchburg State University. And the idea was really looking at, we control almost every aspect of this ecosystem. We have students who we can really start to hopefully shape and steer them towards a fulfilling career in education with a solid middle class life and good benefits right out of college. We know that we have a school that can train them, and we know that we have the employer who can hire them. So when we look at, really from start to finish of this problem, you can really control that in some of our cities. And we have 27 institutions of higher learning in Massachusetts. And so the pilot really here is, can we start somewhere around grade 8 or 9 and really start making a strict emphasis on introducing students to the concept of having a fulfilling and meaningful career in education, working them towards that, getting them interested, additional programming, to really incentivize students, and then provide a financial incentive of, if you choose to go into education, we will remove some of those financial barriers that it might otherwise prevent you from doing that, as well as incentivize students to say, I wasn't looking at it before, but I am now. And to the 16-year-old or 17-year-old out there who's, business school or education, and sometimes the dream in Silicon Valley or Wall Street seems a little bit more tempting, but if you have an entire degree paid for at Fitchburg State, and you're starting from scratch, and at age 21 you'll be making a middle class salary. Well, all of a sudden that proposition becomes a little bit more tempting, and then Fitchburg State would match some of its funding, and then ultimately they would be guaranteed a job upon successful completion back at the high school within 6 months of graduation. And so that compact was just signed this year, and so we'll expect to send the first wave of students this year to Fitchburg State for a start in the fall of 2022. And obviously, really, it's going to take us 4 years, but more more realistically, we're probably talking about 6 to 8 years before we see a noticeable uptick. We need our first class of high school freshmen to really be incentivized and enticed to this is a meaningful career. And, you know, the reality is that's one pilot, but we're going to need institutions and school systems across the Commonwealth to really look at some of these innovative programs. So the same is true. So we're just talking about education there. But, you know, at Fitchburg High, and I'm sorry to use, you know, the only other example I have in my district, which is Fitchburg, you know, whether it's a water operator program or green and renewable energy, Fitchburg High, realizing that, you know, not every student's going to, Senator Cronin detailed it, and it's a source of never-ending frustration for me of the students who need it the most aren't getting into Monty Tech, and the students that are going on to, you know, amazing four-year institutions are often taking the place of students who really need and really want to be at a technical school to be able to get a job at age 18. So instead, traditional high schools are now looking at how can we offer what our vocational and technical schools are not offering. And so Fitchburg is doing a drinking water and sewer operator program with the idea of, we know we don't have enough people in the pipeline. It's an aging workforce in water infrastructure. And there's an opportunity, once again, to get a middle-class job at age 18 without any college debt whatsoever, and essentially to have a job guaranteed, ready and waiting for you when you graduate with a certificate from high school. The same is true with green and renewable energy. And, you know, what we're really seeing is, you know, we expect that Massachusetts will be the global leader in offshore wind energy by the end of this decade. There'll be new seaports constructed along our seaboards, and we're talking about tens of thousands of jobs created in the Commonwealth. And while we may not benefit from the offshore factor of, I don't think there's going to be any offshore wind ports built in Fitchburg or Lunenburg, what we can really provide and what can really be enticing for us is the opportunity to participate in terms of that workforce and really training workforce at every level, from installation to maintenance, as well as grid modernization that will come with that will certainly impact our entire region. I don't think we need to make any arguments for why we need grid modernization in north central Massachusetts. We know we sorely need that, and that will come in the near future. And so while we see some high school programs that are starting to emerge around renewable energy, we're going to need just about every high school and vocational school in the Commonwealth really targeting these, and that's an opportunity, you know, to have our workforce be really reflective of the high school populations that we have right now across the country. So those are the types of programs we're looking at. I know we only highlighted a few specific industries, but I think those are applicable across the board.
Thank you. No, I think those are great programs, and you jarred my memory when you talked about offshore wind. I would be remiss, because I support, and I know many of our constituents support, if the municipal energy bill gets refiled, we are hoping that the three of you will support that bill. Because
I filed it this year.
Excellent, because that is way overdue. And for those of you who I know are behind this, I did not leave this for last. I really have limited amount of time, but I am completely behind that, and still am completely behind that. So hopefully it gets some traction. Baffling to me why we can't get this moved out of committee, but hopefully with your guys' support, we can do that.
Yeah, thank you. No, to address Michael's question, and I'm very proud to represent Lunenburg with his colleagues here, the experts on so many areas. But I wanna just to say that I know Senator Cronin already mentioned the bill S1343. Is that the one for the municipalities? Just make sure I wrote it down. So hopefully that will address some of the concerns that Michael brought up with the cost to renovate the town hall or other buildings. In terms of affordable housing, I think, quite frankly, the 40B has worked very well. I know there's ways we could improve it, but maybe we can, I don't know, there's talks about hopefully maybe start a different program that would encourage ownership, and I certainly understand where he's coming from when he talks about wealth that is passed on in generation. I think that's very important for creating wealth in any country. Another issue that he brought up was diversity, and that's why I think we need to have universal pre-K. We need to have a healthcare system that does not put any barriers on people seeking either mental health or health-related costs that I think we need to address. Housing. I mean, you look at those three things: education, housing, and healthcare. They're all related, and I think we need to work together to address the disparity that he brought it up when it comes to the diversity. And I think those are areas in which, if we improve upon, we can certainly, hopefully, be able to have more equal representation when it comes to some of those positions that he mentioned. Just to address that, there's a H584, which is an act relative to anti-racism, equity, and justice in education. It's a bill that I've co-sponsored. I know Senator Cronin was on a forum last week, or just earlier this week with me and Senator Eldridge and other colleagues, a way that would basically create a commission that would increase the retention of students, of teachers of color in public schools. So certainly we need to enhance that representation. I mean, also myself as an immigrant, coming to this country from another country at the age of 14, I would never imagine that I would be a state representative one day. So I certainly echo his concerns, and I certainly want to see more diversity everywhere we go. I know it's approaching 8 o'clock, and some of my colleagues may have to go, but I want to maybe just open up for another question, if that's okay.
Yeah, well, I know that the town manager has some questions.
Okay,
Yeah.
good, okay.
And hopefully this should be quick. Some are clarification questions. The increase in Chapter 70, are we to assume that it's because this is the first year of the implementation of the Student Opportunity Act? No? Okay. For Lunenburg, because that was a significant increase. Okay. I think.
That's probably a longer conversation
Okay.
that we should have after.
All right. And we received notification through Representative Sina's office through the statewide State House service about host community agreements and social consumption cafes. That's something I think the board will be interested in weighing in on. So if you can tell us when you would need input from the town, because we recently signed an HCA. And there could be a proposal for a social consumption cafe in town. So that is, I think, will be of high importance to the town. Our state aid, we've been told in the past that we should be able to budget the governor's budget as a minimum base, that anything voted subsequently by the House and Senate would be equal to or above that amount. Can we assume the same for this year?
I think you probably have a better sense than we do in terms of the history on this. I mean, typically, from what I've seen, that is the foundation. The governor sets the foundation, and the legislature builds on that. That's typically how I've seen it. But again, I only have. I think each of us have only had 1 year of budget before us to really. So I can't say that was the 1 year that we've witnessed. So it's my understanding that that's typically how municipalities begin to operate, but I can't say that based on a long track record either.
Well, I'll ask a follow-up to that, and I appreciate, your perspective on that being all freshmen. But I guess I will redirect that or reframe it. Is there any buzz that you hear from either of your houses that it's the governor's budget is out of line with what you were expecting?
I think there's a realization that the governor's budget is a political statement. I think that's in effect how we view it, as it should be. But as we move towards the fiscal year 23 budget process, the House will take up their budget in April. They basically are going to start from scratch. So some of those top lines, I think it's safe to look at those things in the governor's budget as a baseline that, as a value statement we don't want to cut. But there's a veto. The reality is there's a veto-proof majority in both chambers of the House and Senate. The House is going to basically start from scratch in April. We're going to take the budget up in May, and so we're happy to continue that dialogue. And just to briefly hit on host community agreements, please let us know your concerns now. I have not studied the bills that were reported out of committee last week, and I am not intimately educated on those issues. So please let us know what the town's interests are and what your concerns are. We're happy to have a dialogue, offline or a Zoom, just to talk about the different HCA's that the town is considering or in, and then crunch time for when it really matters is when one of those bills is taken up on the House or Senate floor. We have the ability to propose amendments to change legislation, and then finally, if it is acted upon, I don't know that any reform legislation will be acted upon in this session in conference committee between the House and Senate.
Okay.
And I think that's true across the kind of the spectrum, not just with the social consumption concerns. There's just yesterday alone, I voted on more than 240 pieces of legislation. We're coming to the deadline for committees, for the initial committee to have held their hearing and formed a disposition for a particular piece of legislation. And so, I sit on the Public Service Committee, for example. Sunday night, we had to we had a weekend to really review the bills and cast a vote. And so, I know I was immersed in public service and, community development and small business legislation, the two major committees that I serve on, with mental health putting out probably in the next hour an omnibus bill that they'll be putting forward. So all of the other, 30 committees that are out there and also doing similar work, to Senator Cronin's point, I'm not focusing on the other committees. We're focusing on the committees that we sit on. So as you may hear of bills, through the media that are really impactful to you, please don't assume that we are aware of every other bill. I think at this point, we're kind of finishing the specialization period of the term, and now we'll start to see some of these broader bills, whether they're omnibus bills, move forward. Or other bills start to move forward into a more substantive discussion in their relative chambers and House or Senate Ways and Means. So if you hear things that really either give you concern or that you're strongly in favor of, it is helpful for us to just be aware of what your positions are, because these things will start to move quickly from this point forward.
Okay. And for ARPA funding from the state, what's our timeline? Would we need to get new potential projects or outside of the list of priorities that we're going to provide tonight?
So the first round of ARPA was already settled. So in terms of, the special grants, they should be notifying you, the various, whether it's Department of Transportation or Mass Department of Environmental Protection, and other relevant committees should be, they should be starting to post some of these funding opportunities, and when they'll start accepting funding applications. And often they're communicating directly to department head level through public safety or the DPW. In terms of the next round of ARPA, I think the same is true of giving us one single list of what are your top 5 priorities for the district in terms of all kind of capital projects, whether it's Flat Hill Road culvert, whether it's the gas station, park revitalization, primary school, all of those, whatever the top 5 or so are, and in that rank is helpful to us because, ARPA, we don't have a time frame for when the exact ARPA will come out, and it's really dependent upon, kind of whether or not there's another variant that emerges and how the state needs to respond. But ultimately, I'd say, there will be earmark processes or opportunities in each of these pieces of legislation, federal infrastructure, the last round of ARPA, and the budget. And so I think giving us that one list that we can work from, and if the best of opportunities arises where we start to be able to move through that list, we'll certainly communicate, maybe what's 6 through 10 on the list. But I think we'll start with that top 5, and that should probably give us enough to work with from there.
Okay. Last question I had, we've discussed this, I have personally with the 3 of you, about the bond bills, the previous bond bills, and what is the reality that we'd ever receive that funding?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the reality is that the legislature authorizes bonds, and then the governor funds them through his capital investment plan. I have had conversations with members of the opposite party who are in my chamber, and they are unaware of, either they themselves or people they know, getting their bonds funded. That's just the reality as I understand it. I don't have a direct line to the governor, for the town, I can tell you, I would proceed as if those will go unfunded. And that's not just for Lunenburg, that's for the other 11 cities and towns. I say the same thing to every select board or town manager that I have a discussion with.
Thank you, I appreciate honesty.
And to that point, I think you'll hear talks about other bond bills coming, and I think while we may apply for things in the bond bills, I think that you'll hear us maybe socialize them very differently from how you have in the past. It's just it's kind of perfunctory. You'll submit some maybe top priorities, but I would caution anybody against planning for those dollars to ever arrive. The same is true not only across across municipalities, but state institutions.
And that could change next year with the new governor and the lieutenant governor. It could be the same, or it could be a different dynamic.
So, Fitchburg State is an opportunity. They have millions of dollars in bonds. They too are not seeing, and they're a state agency, and they're not seeing the actual dollars come to fruition. If that's helpful.
It does. Thank you.
I don't know the exact origin or intent of the town manager's question, but I can infer that we get a lot of that question that people say, oh, things are funding in the bond bill, and we always have to tell people the way that works. And I think sometimes we need someone else in the State House to say it, because our experience, although lengthy in some of our cases about what the experience is, people either think that we're hedging or we're not really being forthright about what gets funded. So I appreciate the response. I would.
Got it.
Yes.
You're the chairman.
Comes with a certain skill set. Before you gentlemen go, I'm going to just open up for the board members. If anybody has any remaining question, I want to be cognizant of the time. I appreciate the fact of you spending an hour plus with us. I know your time is important, especially this time of year, but I will just ask if anybody has any other things. No. So I want to thank you all for your time. I appreciate the dialogue.
Mr. Jeffries has.
Oh, Mr. Jeffries, go ahead.
Yeah, I understand that that the delegation has a lot of, well, not a lot, but some interaction with our federal representative, Lori. And I was just wondering if you have any updates for us on anything that you're working on with her that will have an impact to our community.
So, I think we worked very closely with her on kind of statewide dollars around infrastructure as part of the federal infrastructure bill, and really just communicating again some of these larger, more thematic areas around dollars for municipal roads, for rail, for water and drinking water, and the conversation I had with her was somewhat comical but very serious in that she's really developed she's known as the water and the sewage expert now in Congress, and she was like, never did I want to become the sewage queen here, but I really do. She's developing this base of expertise and realizing that there are unique challenges to her districts, from Gardner on the furthest edge all the way to the northern Merrimack Valley. That there's each of our communities have some really really big issues, and so I think we all worked to communicate some of those needs around water, wastewater, and stormwater issues in our municipalities, and then certainly you're hearing a lot of talk about Build Back Better and the president's top priorities. I think Congresswoman Trahan has been tremendous in asking us what some of the most impactful things would be for our district as a whole. Rep. Sina talked earlier about childcare. I know certainly work to communicate childcare, education, municipal infrastructure, and housing all as top level priorities as part of those as she's looking at those initiatives. So there's no specific piece in the hopper, or I won't pretend to know exactly what's in the hopper within the corridors of Capitol Hill in Washington, but I can say that she's tremendously communicative, and she's always requesting information about how what she's working on at a federal level could could impact our specific districts.
And I would just add to what Representative Kushmarek said by identifying two areas where I believe we could have future collaboration and partnership that could benefit Lunenburg. The first is that members of Congress have the ability to do I believe up to 10 community projects to be funded at about $1 million. Last year was the first year that occurred. So to return to a common refrain, you don't get what you don't ask for. If there is an asset that you would like us to carry to the federal delegation, please let us know that fits within that parameters. And the second opportunity, I think, would be the federal infrastructure bill has not arrived yet, and that's $1.2 trillion. Some of it is, 5.3 is going to go to highways and bridges, but there's also going to be competitive buckets. And I think an area to look to work with Representative Trahan would be if there are competitive grant applications. And Heather, I can forward this to you, but I received from Senator Markey today on his webpage, I'm sure you've already been there, what those different programs look like. So I think an opportunity to work with the federal delegation is for us to provide letters of support with the board and local communities for the projects that we want to be competitive for that fit those funding streams.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Again, I want to thank all three of you for coming. The dialogue has been very lively. It's been a broad scope of subjects. I appreciate your input on all of them. I look forward to continuing our communications and bringing everything into a positive direction. Keep us posted as the budget season goes on, and we will try to keep you abreast of everything happening here that you need information from us. And if you and your offices will continue what you've already been doing, providing us with updates, what's happening on at the State House, that would be excellent. And I thank you all for your time this evening.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry for everybody who's been waiting for us to finish.
Okay, if we want to go to Capitol, I assume 7:30?
Yes, yeah. The ARPA.
Yep, all right, so 7:30, we have a presentation by Capital Strategic Solutions on the ARPA funding, the American Rescue Plan Act funding. This is being presented to us. Capital Strategic Solutions is on Zoom, I believe.
They are, yes. Jennifer Thompson and Nicole Figueroa. I'm going to butcher Nicole. Figueroa. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having us. My name is Jennifer Thompson, and I'm joined by Nicole Figueroa. Nicole, are you able to share the screen and put the PowerPoint up?
Unfortunately, I'm not able to. I will need to be provided with permissions. Here we go.
And while you're getting that ready, I apologize for the delay.
Oh, no problem.
Right. It was actually an interesting conversation. Go ahead, Jen.
Yeah, and it ties into what we're about to talk about. So, I mean, it's actually a really good segue. So, thank you again for having us. You can go right to the first slide, Nicole.
Sure thing.
So Nicole and I both work for Capital Strategic Solutions. We are a certified woman-owned business in Marlborough, Massachusetts, and we're staffed with former municipal employees. We specialize in grant writing and administration, community public relations and community engagement, crisis communication, website design services, and tactical social media outreach for cities and towns. We are doing a lot of work right now, including for you folks in Lunenburg, on ARPA funding. We do specialize, as I said, in grant writing and administration. We do have a specialized focus in federal grant programs like ARPA, FEMA, and CARES Fund. I'm just going to quickly do an overview of the American Rescue Plan Act, and I think you probably all already know this, but for folks that are watching at home or are hearing this for the first time, we just want to quickly go through what the ARPA money can be used for. So we're talking tonight about your local allocation of ARPA funds. These are the ARPA funds that the town of Lunenburg receives directly. Your legislative delegation was just in, and there was a lot of mention and conversation about state ARPA funds, which are in addition to this local funding. And in some ways, hopefully, they're going to complement and coincide with each other, just like the infrastructure bill that will be coming down from the federal government. So the American Rescue Plan Act, as you know, was signed into law on March 11th, 2021. and it created the Coronavirus Local Fiscal Recovery Fund. The federal government abbreviates that as CLFRF. The intent of this legislation is to support state, local, and tribal governments in responding to the impacts of COVID-19, as well as efforts to contain COVID-19. As you're probably aware, Lunenburg is eligible to receive in that direct allocation just over $3.5 million in ARPA funds. Cities and towns like Lunenburg have until December 2024 to spend those funds. So there are 4 general categories that cities and towns are allowed to use their ARPA funding. The first is probably the most obvious, and that's to respond to the public health emergency itself. Also within that category is a provision that cities and towns can use it to respond to the negative impacts of the pandemic and impacts that it's had on your community. Things like assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, and aid to those impacted industries that were hit the hardest, like tourism, travel, hospitality. And we'll get into a little more detail on each of these. The second category is there's a provision in the legislation that allows cities and towns, should they choose, to provide premium pay to essential workers that worked and had direct contact during the pandemic. The third provision is general government services through a revenue reduction, and we'll talk a little bit about that in a future slide. And then the fourth category is cities and towns can use the ARPA money to make investments in your water, sewer, and broadband infrastructure. There are 4 very specific non-allowable uses that you cannot use the ARPA money for. So you cannot use the ARPA money to deposit money into a pension fund. You can't use it to pay off any of your existing debt. You cannot use it for legal settlements or judgments. And you can't use it to replenish your financial reserves. For example, you can't put money into your stabilization funds with the ARPA funding. So just to give you some examples in each of those categories and some more information, the first category, as I mentioned, is probably the most obvious. You can use the ARPA funding for public health and economic impact projects. Some examples are vaccinations, monitoring for COVID-19, contact tracing, protective equipment for your employees. Again, support to your vulnerable populations and allowing, giving them adequate access to medical and public health services. Continued funding for prevention and mitigation in your public facilities. So things like reconfiguring public facilities to make sure you have proper social distancing. Just like you saw with your CARES funding, a lot of those same things that were eligible under CARES are also eligible under ARPA. You can use it for payroll and benefits for public safety and public health staff that are primarily dedicated to COVID-19 efforts. You can certainly use it for improvements to your public health departments. And then you can use it, like I mentioned earlier, for economic assistance to populations in your town that have demonstrated an economic hardship from the pandemic. That second category that I mentioned is that cities and towns have the option to provide premium pay to some of your essential workers. Now, the legislation spells out those that can be eligible for this type of premium pay, and it applies to employees that during the pandemic had regular in-person interactions or regular physical handling of items that were also handled by the public. So employees that worked for the town but teleworked would not be eligible. The intent of the legislation is for employees that were needed to maintain that continuity of operations and continuity of government in your critical infrastructure sectors like healthcare, public health, public safety, childcare, education, sanitation, transportation, and food services. And there are limits on the amounts that you can pay that are spelled out in the legislation. This third category is the most flexible category for municipalities. And this changed recently. Up until January, we were operating under Treasury guidelines that were called the interim final rule. It was the initial guidance that they had put out, the Department of Treasury, the U.S. Treasury Department. In January, they released the final interim rule, which gave us some more flexibility in this category, especially in terms of how you calculate your revenue loss. So this category is intended for communities to be able to recoup and reallocate some of the revenue that it is estimated you lost because of the pandemic. So originally when this provision came out, there was a formula that the US Treasury Department used, and municipalities had to calculate, based on that standard formula, that revenue loss. What changed in January is that municipalities now have the option of not using the calculation and instead can use up to $10 million without exceeding your actual allotment, just in this category. So in Lunenburg's case, you could, if you choose to, fund projects out of this category all the way up to your full allotment. So you could fund the full 3.5 million out of this revenue loss category if you wanted to. Now, why would you want to do that? Well, like I said, this really is your most flexible category. So you can use this particular category for general government services. And that's defined in the statute as any service that's traditionally provided by government, with some exceptions. And it's those exceptions that we spoke about in the earlier slide. You can't use it for debt, for financial reserves, legal judgments, or depositing money into pension funds. But again, that does give you a lot of leeway in terms of general government services. I will say, we always kind of caution in this slide to just be cognizant, if you're thinking of using this category, that these are one-time, non-reoccurring funds. So for example, if you chose to fund something that you would normally fund out of your operating budget, you have to be planning and thinking that, after 2024, these funds are no longer going to be available. So you should be thinking about how you would continue to fund something if you choose to fund it through ARPA funding. So some examples of those general government services that you can fund out of that revenue loss category are things like maintenance and pay-as-you-go for building or infrastructure projects. That can include road projects, work and building of schools and town facilities, cybersecurity, health services, environmental remediation, school or educational services, police, fire, public safety, and really, like I mentioned, any other traditional government expense that's not excluded through those 4 delineated exclusions in the legislation. And finally, that last category, investments in infrastructure. So the ARPA funding allows you to fund water and sewer projects that would normally be eligible under the EPA's Clean Water and Drinking Water State Revolving Fund programs. Those projects can include road work as well, if it's associated with the water and sewer work. You can also fund stormwater out of the infrastructure category, as long as it has a water quality benefit. And then the last piece, and you mentioned it earlier tonight when your legislative delegation was in, is it does fund broadband projects, especially projects that meet or exceed certain downloads and focus, as you mentioned, on those unserved or underserved areas of the town. So that's a general overview of how you can use the ARPA funds. And then I'm going to turn it over to Nicole, who will speak to you about the different kind of outreach and engagement that we can assist Lunenburg with in terms of soliciting input into projects.
Thank you, Jennifer. So I'm Nicole Figueredo. I am the Chief Executive Officer for Capital Strategic Solutions. I'm very fortunate to work with Jennifer and our other partners here at Capital Strategic Solutions. As far as your ARPA funds go and getting the community involved and engaged in how these funds will be spent, we're going to use a variety of different methods to engage your community that will allow them to have ownership into the projects and programs and the services that have the potential to shape their future and the future of generations to come in Lunenburg. Our robust community engagement strategy will include, I'm not going to read word for word off of this, but some examples are a web page on the existing Lunenburg website, an email address where they can send questions in. We can answer those questions, social media engagement, as well as media engagement through press releases, pitched news stories, press-ready articles. We'll develop multilingual print materials, offer virtual and streamlined community meetings while we're kind of still under, specific guidelines related to COVID with mask mandates and things like that. And when allowable, we'll have in-person community meetings and also attend some local events and get that information out there about these funds and what impact they have on the future for residents and business owners in Lunenburg. So this is a sample of kind of the web outreach that we'll do. We'll create an overview of ARPA with project eligibility, along with the U.S. Treasury links and state ARPA funding and earmarks on that web page. We'll also have community surveys available for community feedback in multiple languages. We'll provide guidance on funding, allocations, and have applications there for the various programs that Lunenburg decides to spend these funds on. We'll provide project updates and overviews, and we'll periodically update those project web pages and get that information out to the communities. It's really important for people to see, people in Lunenburg, your residents, your business owners, even your visitors, to see how fiscally responsible that they're being together and the changes that their community is going to have, and to have that responsibility and that ownership into these projects. We'll also host a calendar of events so that if they have a question or concern, they can attend one of the events or just kind of mark it down on where we're going to be and host that information there. So like I said, we'll be using social media as an engagement platform. Lunenburg has a well-established Facebook page. So we'll use that to build engagement, increase your followers, also use it to build algorithms. So for the posting and things like that, it will boost your website algorithms as well. So it's a 2-for as well. We'll also give insight into opportunities and provide updates for the projects, programs, services, and initiatives that the funding is used for. And we can also create some polls and surveys, which is a really neat tool with social media. We'll also team up with the Lunenburg Community Access Channel, the public access channel. We've already had this discussion at the staff meeting last week. So it was really exciting to have them on board and have already start those conversations. So we're looking forward to that. Maybe conduct some interviews with, the select board or town administration about the funding, host Zoom webinars and meetings, engage neighborhood associations and enlist the Chamber of Commerce for business meetings, as well as incorporate social service agencies into these discussions. So the in-person meetings will be targeted for late winter or early spring, where we'll meet at, conduct neighborhood meetings, like we said, meetings for the businesses, community service meetings, and we'll also go out there and attend local events. There'll be some we call it boots on the ground outreach. I feel like we get a little bit more participation when we're there in person, and it's a real opportunity for people to have those conversations. Some of the recommended priority projects that we've talked about are, public health support, COVID public safety measures, mental health assistance. That's been a big topic in a lot of the communities that we work with. The small business assistance, the grants, and the mitigation for infrastructure improvements. Those are another couple of big projects that communities are talking about. Individual assistance. There's a lot of people that have been impacted by the pandemic, and they're still looking for some relief and some support with either their mortgage, their rent, or potentially utilities. Digital equity for all, that's your broadband and your public Wi-Fi. Infrastructure improvements are another great category in which this funding can be sent. Water main replacements, there's a big lead copper rule coming up, wastewater upgrades, stormwater enhancements, and roads and sidewalks. There's also been some discussions about parks and recreation, upgrading to existing parks, maybe creating a pocket park, and increasing green space. And I love that category because it goes right back to contributing to mental health and well-being. Getting people back outdoors and spending time outdoors is really great for your mental health. So with that, that concludes our presentation. I'm sorry I talk really fast, so if there's any questions, please feel free.
Thank you. I'm from New York. That was actually pretty slow paced, so that was pretty good.
Love that.
I will open it up to the board if anybody has any questions for the presenters. I'm trying to look at both places. I don't have the Zoom in front of me.
I don't have any hands raised.
Michael, are you raising your hand?
yes.
Okay, there we go. Okay, Michael.
Yeah, so thank you for the presentation, Nicole and Jennifer. That really was very helpful and informative. My question really is actually to you, to Mr. Chair. Would it be beneficial for us, that was a lot of information, would it be beneficial for us to perhaps put this as an agenda item at an upcoming meeting, just to kind of brainstorm some thoughts?
Oh, yeah, of course. I mean, I think we just wanted to get the presentation from the company first, and yes, there's a lot for us to discuss, sure.
Yeah, I think it's just a lot for me to digest, but I do have some good notes here that I took from what you said. A couple things stood out to me about being able to, really police and teachers being able to provide them with some form of supplemental pay, wondering about our decrease in local receipts and how we were projecting that out. That's revenue that could be recovered. And then also town facilities and getting a better understanding of what the scope is that would cover those facilities. So it would, again, just helpful starts for us. And perhaps if you guys, if you're able, Jennifer and Nicole, just to forward a little bit more information as it relates to those requirements for those three areas, that would be helpful.
Sure. And I'll say this too. I think for us, it's always helpful when, like you said, there's a lot of information in here that we're presenting tonight, but if the board comes back and meets and starts to brainstorm and talk about the type of projects that you're considering, I think that helps us when we go out in the community, because I think folks, especially folks that aren't normally involved in government, can be a little bit overwhelmed with being asked what they want the money to be spent on. But having some, general guidance from the board on existing priorities that you already know are there, right? You talked about them earlier tonight. There's a real need for in many areas in Lunenburg where you could spend this money. So for us to kind of know that when we get out in the community, we can kind of guide the discussion around those general areas. That's certainly helpful for us.
If I may ask, if we don't already, can we get a copy of what you presented, the deck that you presented tonight, so we can review it at our own pace?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Because that would be helpful to the rest of the board, I think.
Sure.
It'll be up on, once the website is loaded too, we'll make sure all the materials are loaded up on there as well.
But at least you can send to the town manager what you showed tonight, so she can distribute it.
Absolutely.
Mr. Dwyer, do you have any questions?
I don't. I thought it was an excellent presentation, a lot of great information, and thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Franco?
Yes, I just want to add to that. Thank you for the presentation, and I look forward to brainstorming with the rest of the board against the backdrop of what we learned. Thank you.
Welcome.
And I would echo what they all said, so thank you for the presentation. There's a lot for us to digest and consider, and then come back to you through the town manager after our discussions here over the next few weeks.
Great.
Thank you very much.
Nice to meet all of you.
All right,
Thanks.
you too.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Okay, I don't know that we're getting closer to being back to our agenda, but let's just say that we are. And at 8 p.m., we have National Motors Corporation. Carlos Bismarck Torrero is request to reinstate a Class 2 auto dealer license. Please, sir. I'm assuming that you are Carlos.
Yes.
All right. So if you can introduce yourself and...
Carlos Torrero from National Motors.
And you are looking to reinstate, so I guess you missed the deadline of the renewal.
Yes.
So everything here, we have the full packet. Madam Town Manager, is everything in order?
Yes.
Okay. And National Motor Corporation, doing business on Summer Street, had been in force until the end of the year.
Yes.
Okay. So this is nothing new, just a reapplication because of the missed deadline. So all the paperwork is here? And the fees are paid?
Yes.
Okay. So we have all the paperwork here. Everything's in order to go back on the roll as a Class 2. Does anybody on the board have any questions for the applicant for this reinstatement?
I do not.
Mr. Jeffries or Mr. Franco?
Yes,
Yes, you do?
I do.
Okay, Mr. Jeffries.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you this evening. I don't have many questions for you, but if you wouldn't mind just helping me better understand, did you not operate your business over the last month?
He want to know if you operated your business over the last month?
Yes.
Yes, you did operate it, or no, you
I did
didn't?
operate, yes. But
Okay,
just for a few days.
just for a few days?
Yes, because I was sick with coronavirus. And I opened a business. I was closed for almost 3 years because when I start open the business, they made me ask to do the bathroom. So it took like 7 months to do the bathroom. They started beginning to build the street. That's was another issue to open the business. Then they was parking all the truck in my yard, and I let them park. So I closed for 1 year after they finished the street.
The street renovation?
Yes. Then, after that reopened, then the coronavirus came. I get sick for like, stay in the hospital for like 10 days. Then I Spain, like I had like pneumonia. Then I have to stay home for like 4 months.
Oh, boy.
Then they start closing all the business back again, and I closed for 1 year, and I just opened last year,
Okay.
in June. Was a lot of issue to open that place. I spent like $70,000 in bills and making the place, keeping the place clean, paying electricity, paying my rent. Almost $72,000.
Okay.
Yeah, that certainly sounds, really difficult. Difficult conditions to operate a business under. I think what I'm asking more specifically is about just this past 30 days. Did you operate your business in the last 30 days?
Like I say, I get sick in December with the coronavirus, like around December 18. So I spent like 15 days in my house. Then I was fine for like 5 days, and I get the bad flu going on too. It was like a mess.
I think his question is, since
Yes.
you didn't have an active license
No.
in January, did you operate your business without a license?
I was there, but not selling the cars,
Okay.
was
So he was
outside,
there, but
online.
not selling cars. So he was at his property, but
Yes.
not doing any business with the cars. Just in
I
case
keep-
you can't hear him,
I keep
Mr. Jeffries.
The sign.
I understood that.
Okay.
And then my only other question, and this really just about process, is just to have a better understanding of what happened with the renewal documentation and why that was delayed.
Because I get sick with.
I understand what you said about December 18th onward, but most of that was sent in
I
September.
came from Mexico, then I went back to Dominican Republic, and I went to Miami to see my father, and I get sick. I couldn't go through to the papers. I sent the paper by December 28th. I delivered
Okay.
the.
All right, thank you. No other questions.
Mr. Franco, any questions?
I don't, thank you.
Okay. First of all, I'm glad to see you're better.
Okay, thank you very much.
And I have no questions. I'm fine with the renewal, and everything is back in order. I'm sorry that you had to go through the whole thing, but that's from the state, not from us. So I would entertain a motion at the request of this Class 2 auto dealer license of Carlos Bismarck Torrero, doing business as National Motor Corporation, located at 40 Summer Street.
Yes.
I move to approve.
Do I have a
Second.
second? Okay, we have a
I'll
second.
second that.
Okay. All those in favor, let's do a roll call because we got remote users. Mr. Dwyer,
Aye.
Mr. Franco,
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries,
Aye.
and an aye from me. All right, we'll send this down. Gentlemen, Mr. Franco, Mr. Jeffries, hopefully you can get to Town Hall to sign this tomorrow.
I can be there tomorrow morning.
Okay. You're all
Fine, thank
set.
you
Once
very
this
much.
is signed, when can he pick it up?
As soon as it's signed.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
will
So
we let
the-
him know?
yes.
We will let you know when it's signed.
All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. What is this?
That's later on.
Oh, well, later on, okay. So, to all those people who are still with us from the Cultural Council, I apologize. But we are here. So we have 5 people at interview. I'm sure this is not going to be any kind of Watergate-type grilling. It's just going to be an introduction. For those who are present, please introduce yourselves here at the microphone. To those who are remote, we'll call on you. Just tell us your name, your address, why you want to be on the Cultural Council, and then I think we'll hear from all 5, and then we'll open it up to the board. If anybody has any questions for anybody, instead of doing them individually, just might be easier to open up all questions to the board, if that's okay. So, I'm just going to call them as they're listed here on my agenda. So Joan Pease of 11 Wintergreen Court. Is Joan with us?
She
I'm
is.
on Zoom.
Welcome.
Well, thank you for having me. Busy night for you guys, as
Oh.
I'm sure it always is.
So please, if you just introduce yourself and why you want to be on the Cultural Council.
Absolutely. I am a long-term resident, over a decade in Lunenburg, and I have served on other town boards before. I served on the Sewer Commission for many years and was clerk and chair. I moved on and began taking oil painting lessons from a local artist in town, and enjoyed it immensely. And then I saw Elise's notification in Facebook that she was looking for people for the Cultural Council. So I gave her a call and discussed with her what are some of the duties of members of the Cultural Council. And she told me that one of the big duties is to evaluate grant proposals. And they have money that they can give out for cultural and art programs. And one of the things they do is to evaluate all these applications so they can then decide who gets the grants. One of the things about grant application is that in order to prevent bias in doling out the money and transparency as to where the funds are going, one of the things that's very useful is developing a rubric. And I have extensive training and extensive use of rubric in my 37 years of being an educator. During that time, I not only wrote grants and received grant money, but I also helped evaluate grant applications, working with the PTA and PTO grants for several districts. So my interest in the arts and cultural development in town, my knowledge and training and how to do rubrics, and my experience in writing and evaluating past grant proposals, I thought I might have something to offer this committee.
Excellent, thank you. So hang on, because again, I'm going to let everybody introduce themselves, and then I'll open the board to see if they have questions for anybody or everybody. Diane Bedoin of 32 2008 Carousel Lane. Is that really an address? That's like a Los Angeles address. 32,000?
It's 32,208.
Oh, 32, okay, gotcha, okay. If you would come to the microphone, please.
Okay. Because I can hear better. My name's Diane Bedoin. My husband and I have lived in Lunenburg now for coming on 4 years. We live at Emerald Place, and it's building 32, unit 208.
Gotcha, okay.
I saw the ad on Facebook that she was looking for volunteers to work on the council. I've been for the past 10 years the president of the Johnny Rowe Veterans Memorial Park in Leominster. Helped build it, literally helped build it. And I'm also on the board of directors for a small group called Operation Service. We're out of Fitchburg and Lunenburg. And what we do is we raise funds all year, and we do community projects, beautification projects. And our main event every year is Trees for Soldiers. We have several locations. We give free Christmas trees to veterans and active duty. We raise funds. I've gotten experience with not only raising money, but very cautiously spending the money we raise. And I'm retired, and this would be a great opportunity to fill some time.
Thank you. So just stay there, because I think you're the only, unless, well, you may have two people up here in a second. So the next one is Amy Zotjeni. Is Amy here with us?
She may have been the one that left.
Yeah, she may have. Yeah, okay, so let's, maybe she had something else she had to get to. So let's say Nancy Heald.
Hello.
Hello?
So I'm Nancy Heald. I live on Mulpus Road in Lunenburg. I've been a town resident for 25 years now, and I love all the little events that I've always tried to support them. And now I have a better schedule, so I'm looking to start doing some volunteering, and I thought the town would be the best place to start.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great. And last but not least, we have Kirsten Snape.
Yes, I apologize that I'm joining you via Zoom. I'm Kirsten Snape. I live at 18 Island Road. I'm almost a lifelong resident. I've moved in and out over the years. I'm a kindergarten teacher at the primary school. My kids are just about to be aging out of our school system. My youngest is a senior this year. And I thought it was time for me to start getting more involved in the community now that I'm going to have a little bit more time available. And my mother mentioned this opportunity and thought it would be a good fit for me.
Excellent. So first of all, thank you all for joining us either remotely or in person. And there's no need to apologize for being remote. It's perfectly fine. All your backgrounds, it's nice to see a diverse set of backgrounds and all different kinds of skill sets that you presented to us in your opening remarks. I would open up to members of the board. I'll call each one of them individually if people have any questions for anybody. For those people watching, the Cultural Council, I don't think has a limit on the number of people, so it's not like we have a number of seats.
22.
22. So there's literally not a number of seats that we're worried about. And not having been on it, but having worked closely with them on certain events over the past years, the diversity and the interest in all different aspects of what they do would be well suited to each of your remarks. So we don't have to worry about anybody vying for seats. This is not a competitive process, it's really more of an inclusive one, which is good. So Mr. Dwyer, do you have any questions for anybody?
I don't have any questions. I just want to thank you all for coming forward and offering to serve the town in this capacity, and I think hearing from all of you, I'm sure you'll do an excellent job on the committee. Thank you.
If I could, did everybody, is it true of everybody that they found out about this on Facebook? Is that how you found out about this?
Yeah, because Elise had written something. One of the other members, existing members.
Mm-hmm.
And is that, Ms. Snape, did you say that too? That's how you found out about it on Facebook?
Actually, Karen Kemp is my mom, and she had mentioned it because she's fairly involved in a lot of town events and councils and registrar of voters, so she had mentioned it to me.
Oh, wow, okay. I'm good friends with
I saw it on Facebook.
Okay. Wow, I'm glad to meet you, Kirsten. I'm good friends with your mom, and I didn't even know that you were a teacher in Lunenburg, so there we go. You learn something every day. Mr. Franco, do you have any questions for any of the four applicants?
I also have no questions, but wish to express my thanks for your stepping forward. And I think you should all be appointed just for sticking with us for 2 hours.
Yes, nobody mentioned persistence, but that was definitely true, so.
No, I look forward to I know that the Cultural Council needs members, and this is great that you've all stepped forward, and hopefully it will become more robust, and I think that's going to take on increased relevance, or I certainly hope it does over the next couple of years here. So thank you.
Excellent. Mr. Jeffries?
I'm going to echo the same comments, and I'm also going to say to Kirsten, your father makes the best tiramisu on the planet, by the way. So
that is his signature dish, and I'm sure he'll appreciate it being mentioned.
Well, be sure to, I had no idea, and I'll be sure to bring that up again, but no, it's really good to see everyone step up and volunteer to be on the cultural council, and I'm going to support all of these nominations tonight, and again, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I will say that I know some of the applicants personally, and some of them I don't. I'm meeting them for the first time, but it's really a great group, and I too look forward to supporting all of the nominations. And with that in mind, I will entertain a motion. If everybody's amenable to this, a group motion instead of individually, for all the membership applicants for the Cultural Council, Joan Pease, Diane Boudoin, Nancy Heald, and Kirsten Snape.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, roll call vote. Mr. Dwyer.
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries.
Aye.
Mr. Franco.
Aye.
And an aye for myself. So if you would go to the town clerk and get sworn in, then you'd be ready for your next meeting, and the chair will get in touch with you. For Ms. Zotyeni, if you are listening, and I'm sorry that if you had to leave early, please arrange with the Select Board's executive assistant to arrange another time to come back for your interview and appointment. So thank you all for coming and attending physically and remotely. I appreciate all your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, town manager report and town manager presentation. It's your choice which one you want to do first. We have the 5-year forecast or the manager report.
Do the shorter of the two first.
Okay, I don't know which one that is.
Town manager report.
Okay.
All right. Announcement of existing vacancies. We have 2 vacancies on the Architectural Preservation District Commission, 2 vacancies on the Economic Development Committee, 1 regular member vacancy, and 2 associate vacancies on the Green Communities Committee, 1 vacancy on the Parks Commission. That would be until joint appointment between the Parks Commission and the Select Board until the next annual town election. 2 vacancies for citizens at large for the Stormwater Task Force, and 1 associate vacancy for the Zoning Board of Appeals. People interested in filling in these positions can fill out the application form, which can be found on the town website, and send them back to the Select Board's office. And if you have any questions on these positions and what the roles and responsibilities entail, you can contact the Select Board's office at 978-582-4130, extension 144. For current employment opportunities with the town, we currently are advertising for a digital services staff librarian, which is a part-time benefited position, assistant to the sewer business manager, which is a part-time benefited position, minutes clerk, which is part-time non-benefited position, a principal assessor, which is a full-time benefited position, trash and recycling coordinator, which is a part-time non-benefited position that's would be paid through a grant, van driver, which is a part-time non-benefited position, and videographers for public access, which are part-time non-benefited positions. And more information can be found on our town website under employment opportunities for more information on these employment opportunities. An update on the Flat Hill Road Culvert Project. The state announced the opening of the Small Bridge Grant Program last week, and this program has changed from the way it was previously designed. So now towns can submit 2 applications up to 2 applications, one for design, which their eligible funding is up to $100,000 for design, and an application for construction up to $500,000. Our consultants will be submitting an application for additional funding for the Flat Hill Road Culvert Project next week. And these applications are being accepted by Mass DOT until April 1st, and the review notification period is 2 to 3 months from that date. An update on 30 School Street, the landscape architect design. The second survey link regarding the landscape design for 30 School Street is on the town website under news and announcements, as well as the presentation provided by Ray Donitz at that last community meeting. And the survey will be open until February 4th. The working group will be meeting with the landscape architect this Thursday, February 3rd, to review the 2 conceptual plans and to provide any comments that are relevant from an operational and permitting standpoint. The board will meet with the landscape architect on February 15th and choose the preferred design and discuss the estimated cost at that meeting. An update on 925 Mass Ave, which is the old gas station. I met virtually with our environmental consultant from the Beta Group, as well as Jim Byrne from EPA. He's the Region 1 Brownfields Coordinator, regarding the available funding that's coming through the federal infrastructure bill. And we are on the site list of projects for that funding. So we discussed this funding source, which is through the Targeted Brownfields Assessment Program. It provides funding for an EPA contractor to do an assessment, remove underground storage tanks, as well as limited contaminated soil removal and backfilling of the area. We discussed whether the town would need to own the property or not, and if we did foreclose on the property, we would assume state liability, not federal liability. Properties that are designated brownfields through DEP will allow for up to 5 years to submit a cleanup plan. Mr. Byrne also explained that there will be another round of funding for cleanup in July that would be awarded by the end of November. So we concluded the meeting that we would have another follow-up meeting in a few weeks and to schedule a date where Mr. Byrne and our consultant can come to a select board's meeting to discuss our options. So this is the most encouraged I've felt after that meeting. I really was very encouraged by Mr. Byrne's clear path towards a funding source, and that we were on the site was his site list was very encouraging. And to know that because of the infrastructure bill, there's a lot of funding that's being funded through the EPA. So I think we're getting closer and closer to the goalposts.
I like it.
Streetlight purchase update. Elizabeth Leiden at Mead, Teller and Costa received a response from Unitil's counsel regarding a breakdown of Unitil's justification for the increase in costs since the previous estimate that we received, it exceeded the previous estimate we received. And she's responded back with about certain costs they identified in the breakdown that included storm-related costs, late charges, as well as there were identifications of pole replacements and whether that includes the light fixture and the bracket, the arm bracket. So we're waiting to hear a response back from them on that question. So more to come. But at least we got that next piece of data but to go forward. An update on COVID from the Board of Health. The total number of new cases reported as of January 22nd was 250, and the positivity rate was 20.28%. So this is downward trending from the previous week. In other meetings, events, and announcements, the warrant to submit articles for annual town meeting is open until Monday, March 21st at 4 p.m. There will be a tax lien auction sale on March 17th at 10 a.m. And as I stated earlier, the town caucus is on March 17th at 6:30 p.m. at the middle school, high school. And these positions that will be up for nomination and on the annual town election ballot are up on the town website under news and announcements.
We dare to have town caucus on St. Patrick's Day, really? That's very gutsy.
14th? I think
It said 17th.
No, sorry, 14th. I think I said the right date, though, in the beginning
You
of the
said
meeting.
yes, and then I
Yes.
thought I heard it wrong. Okay, so
14th is a Monday.
14th,
Yes.
not St.
Not
Patrick's Day.
St. Patrick's Day.
Hallelujah, good.
Would have made it more lively.
Yeah.
Yes. And I know, because I think maybe they're still on, Chris Sullivan is, the Parks Commission is also has a survey out right now for Marshall Park. I think that deadline is February 6th. If Chris can give me a thumbs up.
I think,
or-
hold on, I think I have it
Yeah.
here. Let me just check, and I think I have it
And I will, that will be
as well.
put up on the town website as well, and that is correct. February 6th. And that's all I have.
Excellent. Okay, then to the heart of your matter, right here.
Yes.
Financial forecast.
Okay. Let me share. All right, can everyone see? Okay. All right, so the financial forecast presentation, which is done annual at this time of year. I gave the presentation this prior Thursday to the Finance Committee, so you can also see it on YouTube from their meeting. And for anyone that wants to follow along at home, the document is on the town website under News and Announcements. You'll see both the financial forecast and the capital plan presentations under News and Announcements. I get it. This. Sorry. Not moving forward. This happened to me too, but. Oop, there we go. Skipping ahead. Okay, let's start with, what is a financial forecast? It's a financial planning tool and policymaking tool that projects revenues and expenditures conservatively over a multi-year period. It's a living document that is used to evaluate the budget over a 5-year period. And why do we forecast? It provides a starting point from which a balanced budget is developed. It projects likely outcomes based on historical practices. It allows to look at what-if scenarios, and it indicates future budget gaps. It projects revenues and expenditures conservatively over a 5-year period. Bond rating agencies look favorably upon communities that annually prepare a financial forecast, and it's also required under our town charter, section 4-2, paragraph S. So what is the difference between forecasting and budgeting? A forecast provides a long-term, big-picture financial perspective on service delivery using both known information and assumptions on future revenues and expenditures. And the budget is a specific plan detailing service delivery in the coming fiscal year. The goals of forecasting include gaining a long-term perspective and basis for planning, determining whether fiscal problems are on the horizon. It provides time to change, to plan for change, whether it's favorable or unfavorable, and it reinforces the need for long-range considerations during the annual budget process. Some key concepts in forecasting is that it uses reasonable, conservative assumptions that must be evaluated and updated every year with the changing financial data. It represents the community's projected financial position. It's a tool to evaluate the impact of various budgeting decisions and policy choices over time. It's a living document that we can adjust annually. or even more frequently. And once you develop a baseline projection, the underlying assumptions can be adjusted to address issues. A forecasted shortfall needs to be examined and does imply that some action needs to be taken, or at least planned for, to avoid a financing problem. And the action is to raise revenues or reduce expenditures. Some tools and guides in forecasting include Mass General Law, the town bylaws, and other generally accepted standards, our financial policies, looking at historical trend analysis, the debt service schedules, union and employment contracts, and underlying assumptions. For financial policies, we look at our current financial management policies and objectives, which include exempt and non-exempt borrowing and debt burden. So our policy includes that regular debt is no more than 4% of the regular tax levy. Total annual debt for exempt debt is no more than 11% of the tax levy, and the aggregate is no more than 14% of the tax levy. Our stabilization policy is to deposit from free cash a balance to keep a minimum balance of 5% of the current fiscal omnibus budget in stabilization. And our priority use of free cash is towards regular stabilization, to fund non-reoccurring expenditures, which are capital needs, to deposit into the OPEB trust fund and the special purpose stabilization fund. We also follow our policy regarding capital projects, which are assets that cost $20,000 or more and have a useful life of 3 years or longer. And our OPEB funding policy, which is to deposit 10% of the previous year's free cash amount into that fund each fiscal year. For trend analysis and contractual obligations, we look at historical data to see what type of trends in revenues have occurred over periods of time and use that historical data to assist in predicting future trends. We look at current union contracts, the salary administration plan increases for non-union employees accepted by town meeting vote, and employment contracts, and other known contractual increases for such things as our solid waste, is an example. And the forecast uses only the existing debt service schedules and allows us to project what we have for available capacity to take on new debt. The assumptions used in fiscal years 23 through 27, we look at the different sources to make assumptions about revenues and expenditures. For revenues include property taxes, state aid, estimated local receipts, other available funds such as stabilization and free cash. And on the expenditure side, we look at all operational costs to provide equivalent staffing levels, same as fiscal 22, and related expenses for existing programs. The fiscal year 23 through 27 financial forecast includes the long-term staffing plan for the police and fire departments and provides a scenario for staffing increases for the Lunenburg Public Schools. It includes our debt service schedule, assessments for regional services, pension costs, health and life insurance, general insurance, OPEB costs, reserve fund costs, stabilization expense, and state assessments. To look at the revenues specifically, so we look at known figures and assumptions. Property taxes, the forecast for fiscal 23 increases our property tax by 2.5, which is per Proposition 2.5, and currently is using an estimate of $213,523 for new growth. And the forecast for 24 through 27 increases property taxes by 2.5 and uses an estimate of $300,000 for new growth based on the 5-year average. For debt exclusions, we include our current debt exclusions that are added to the tax levy limit, and there are known figures that are in their debt schedule at this point of time. The forecast for fiscal 23 and through 27 increases or decreases the debt exclusion amounts each year to account for exempt borrowing. For state aid, the forecast for fiscal 23 Level funds state aid for from fiscal 22. And fiscal years 24 through 27, it assumes a 2.5% increase from the previous fiscal year. And so this was done prior to the release of the governor's proposal. So we could always look at a scenario that includes fiscal 23 as that baseline, but with the governor's proposal as well. Other revenues include local receipts. The forecast assumes level funding all local receipt categories, with the exception of motor vehicle category, which is increased by $50,000 each year. And it assumes a 2.5%, a $50,000 increase for 23, and assumes a 2.5% increase for motor vehicle excise thereafter, and a 2% increase in all other local receipt categories for fiscal years 24 through 27. In other available funds, for the forecast includes $1,616,692 of our certified free cash. $1 million of that amount is going towards the fiscal 23 capital plan, $100,000 into the stabilization account, $250,000 into the special purpose stabilization account, and $266,000 into the OPEB trust fund. These all comply with our financial policies. The forecast for fiscal 24 through 27 does not predict the use of any free cash, and other available funds are consistently used across fiscal years 23 through 27. Other available funds include funds from the Artificial Turf Revolving Fund to pay for the turf field debt, and MSBA funds reserved for debt service, totaling approximately $535,000. And this drops off in fiscal 24 for that, the MSBA reimbursement. The forecast assumes use of the special purpose stabilization funds in years with large fire apparatus capital projects. The forecast for all 5 years assumes no draw on the regular stabilization account and assumes no new borrowing. Separate debt scenarios can be run for possible projects, and we have done this at times when we've looked at the TCP project, for instance, and the primary school. We looked at different debt scenarios and how that fits into our debt policy. This slide is just a slide showing property taxes over the 5-year fiscal forecast. It shows the 2.5% raise per proposition 2.5, and with the new growth figure estimated for at this point in time for fiscal 23, and the 300,000 estimated for the next 4 years thereafter, and the debt exclusion amounts that are in our debt schedule right now. This slide shows the state aid, indicating the level funding from fiscal 22 to fiscal 23, and the 2.5% increase on top of that for the years thereafter. This slide is the MSBA reimbursement. As I said, that drops off in fiscal 24. This slide is our local receipts, indicating a 50,000 increase in motor vehicle excise for fiscal 23, and 2.5% in that category for years thereafter, and 2% in other categories. This is just showing our actual versus projection for fiscal 21. That's the most current year that we have in that we have actuals for, as it closed out on June 30th. And as you can see, we brought in 19.26 more in local receipts than estimated. And these are budgeted conservatively. These are elastic revenues a lot of times, so they do fluctuate, especially through different economic times. And the practice of budgeting them conservatively also positively impacts our free cash available for such capital items. You can see that we've been able to fund in the last few years. Looking at free cash and other available funds, the fiscal 23 free cash amount reflects the recommended amount to be appropriated to capital, the OPEB trust fund, the special purpose stabilization fund, and the regular stabilization fund. This leaves a remaining balance of $1,050,270 in free cash. Other available funds includes the MSBA reserve for debt from premiums, the annual amount from the artificial turf revolving fund to pay for the turf field, unexpended capital, and funds from the health insurance stabilization account. No projection of free cash is used in fiscal years 24 through 27, and the financial forecast is not supposed to project free cash for future years that we don't know that certified amount for. So you're going to see that later on as it's going to look like a deficit in those outlying years beyond fiscal 23. But that's mainly due to not inserting this revenue of free cash on the balance sheet. So some of the revenue assumptions for enterprise funds. Revenues from enterprise funds are segregated from the general fund, and these funds are self-supporting. The receipts equal the projected expenses plus indirect costs budgeted in the general fund. And our enterprise funds include sewer, water, solid waste, and public access. The forecast includes indirect costs in the revenue projections, such as health insurance, retirement costs for enterprise employees, and associated enterprise debt payments.
Just to clarify, public access is public access TV, right?
Yeah, public access.
Television.
Yes.
Okay, just so, because public access, I don't know that people without the TV know what that means.
Okay.
So, public access television, okay.
Yes. On the expenditure side, the forecast uses a conservative approach. It looks at actual expenditures from previous years for historical trends. It uses the current budget year as the base. For personnel costs, it covers obligations in collective bargaining contracts, employment contracts, approved wage and classification plans for non-union personnel, and it provides a 2% COLA scenario if all collective bargaining units whose contracts are up for renewal, and for expiring employment agreements and expiring COLA for non-union employees. And this would indicate the net effect of those if a 2% COLA was given to those groups. On the expense side, we look at this annually using historical expenditures and forecast conservatively and maintain our current programs. For categories, it includes personnel and expenses related to providing the same programs and staffing levels, which includes contractual obligations with the exception of the police and fire long-term staffing plans. It also provides the scenario for the long-term staffing plan for the Lunenburg Public Schools. It includes education costs, debt service, capital, group health life insurance, retirement and general insurance, and other amounts to be raised, which include tax title, the overlay, cherry sheet offsets, prior year deficits, snow and ice deficits, and court judgments. It includes state assessments and the reserve fund, special articles, transfers to stabilization, and the special purpose stabilization account, and the OPEB trust fund. The assumptions used for expenditures, it adheres to our financial policies by depositing funds into the stabilization fund to maintain the required balance, deposits funds into the OPEB trust fund per our policy, and it reflects our target budget figures for fiscal 23 that departments were asked to meet when developing their budget. On the state assessments and cherry sheet offsets, these were level funded for fiscal 23 from fiscal 22, and it assumes a 2.5% increase for fiscal years 24 through 27. It level funds the tax title costs of $24,000 for fiscal 23 and includes an increase of 2% each year thereafter for tax title costs. And it funds the overlay account in fiscal 23 at $120,000, and it increases the overlay account by $10,000 each subsequent year of the forecast. And it's based on historical data, and assumes level funding the reserve account. Other assumptions includes that known contractual increases for existing staff. It adds 1 full-time patrolman and 1 full-time firefighter. These are all for just looking at FY23. 6% increase in health insurance, 10% increase in retirement assessment, 5% increase in other insurance costs, a 2.5% increase for the Lunenburg Public Schools and Monty Tech, each individually 2.5%. Increases pavement management by $50,000. It level funds the reserve and departmental expense accounts. It includes $700,000 in tax revenues for capital, $266,000 for OPEB, $100,000 for regular stabilization, and $250,000 in the special purpose stabilization account. For fiscal years 24 through 27, the assumptions include known contractual increases for existing staff. It adds 1 full-time patrolman, because the 5-year staffing plan for the fire, where fiscal 23 will be the 5th year for that.
So it doesn't add 1 per year, it adds 1 over those 4 years, or 1 per year?
1 per year for the fire. I'm sorry, for the
Patrol.
police.
Okay. All right.
But fire, their 5th year, it was a 5-year plan for the fire, a 10-year for the police. Fiscal 23 is the 5th year for fire.
Gotcha, okay.
It includes 8% increase in health insurance, 10% increase in retirement assessment, 5% increase in insurance costs, 2.5% for Lunenburg Public Schools and Monty Tech, $50,000 each year for pavement management, and projects stormwater costs. There's a bump in projected stormwater costs in fiscal 24 due to the requirements for under MS4 for that year. So it's $100,000 every other year, and $120,000 is projected for fiscal 24. Assumes no new debt, increases the $700,000 in fiscal 23 by 2.5% each future year for capital, and increases the fiscal 23 $100,000 for stabilization by 2.5% each year, and $100,000 into OPEB each year. This slide is just showing the expenditures for the different categories. This slide is our debt schedule. It also indicates where we are with our percentage in meeting our policy on the lower portion. And this is a summary of our total revenues and expenditures. So you see fiscal 23, we have a surplus of $66,574, and years thereafter, there are deficits. But like I said, that's mainly attributed to non-use of free cash. So if we look at our debt capacity, this slide just indicates what we'd have available for actual debt capacity in dollars per our policy in each of the years. And this is, like I said earlier, this is a scenario running a 2% COLA impact for different employee units, so both collective bargaining units, non-union employees, and enterprise. The school, this is, I think, the second year we've done this, is they've provided a 5-year staffing plan. And so this includes the incremental increases on top of the 2.5% that's a baseline. So for fiscal 23, it's an additional $365,521, an incremental amount of $283,785 in fiscal 24. an incremental amount of $987,082 in fiscal '25, an incremental amount of $415,804 in fiscal '26, and an incremental amount of $123,429 in fiscal '27. And this, their 5-year staffing plan carries forward those positions throughout, any new positions added each year throughout. It also includes the assumption in that staffing plan is an increase of 3% each year in health insurance costs. So this slide indicates the net impact, including that 5-year staffing plan from the schools. Some conclusions that can be drawn is that it indicates deficits in fiscal years '24 through '27, but like I said, this is largely due to not assuming the use of free cash in those years, but we have the expenditures on the expenditure side that I discussed, and those would be typically offset by free cash. That's what we would use for those expenditures like OPEB and stabilization and the special purpose stabilization. We continue to review the long-term staffing plan for the schools. So we're looking at achieving their intended results per their strategic plan, and review the debt schedule to look at funding scenarios for the proposed TCP building project and the Turkey Hill Elementary School. Next steps would be to continue the discussion of assumptions and scenarios. We can run a scenario, like I said, on the state aid impact to that. Obviously, for fiscal '23, the overall impact was almost $1 million. So if you use that as a baseline and project that forward, it's going to have a large impact. And we received our rate range from Maya, our health insurance, in January, so we've adjusted the 6% to what they said we can conservatively project as the high end of our insurance. We'll receive our actuals in early March. So, and we've been very fortunate in the 3 years, I think.
Yes.
Actually, I think there was a decrease, and yeah, so we've been very fortunate compared to a lot of communities. I'll continue to work with the superintendent on the budget. It's ultimately approved by the school committee. We receive our Monty Tech assessment in mid-March, and I present my preliminary budget February 15th, and all the individual departments are reviewed at finance committee meetings February to March, and our annual town meeting this year is on May 7th. Mark your calendars.
I'll start off with just a question between two slides, and I want to make sure that I understand this. So if we go to the slide on page 29, the 5-year forecast, revenues versus expenditures.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at the projected shortfalls, and of course, as you indicated, it's because we're not indicating or anticipating or using in this forecast any free cash. My question is, those numbers, are they inclusive of the school's numbers, which is the slide on?
No.
Okay, so those numbers on slide 36 and slide 29, those are additive? So the deficit, the shortfall here would be added to the shortfall on the net effect of the LPS staffing plan?
So the LPS staffing plan would be added on top of this.
That's cumulative?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So, for instance, in FY 2024, it would be 2.4 million from a shortfall from the public school staffing plan, and that would be added to the shortfall of $1.76 million on the.
No, that bottom line on the school includes the deficit
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's why, so
Yeah.
it's not cumulative, so
No.
that's inclusive.
Inclusive.
Okay.
Yes,
All right.
sorry.
Gotcha, all right. So the difference between those two numbers is the impact of the school,
Yes.
their LPS plan itself, if I subtracted those two
Yes.
from each other. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The only other question I have for you is, having put this together and having seen these over the years, I would ask you, what do you feel is the thing that we need to keep our eye on the most of all the different kind of parameters that are out there? What is the one that you feel is provides the most uncertainty, if there's anything in particular?
Uncertainty, whether revenue or expenditure? That's a great question. I mean, new growth, I would say, because we all have been discussing during the pandemic what's going to happen with the market and valuations. So, and we base that, our new growth number off, it's looking at building permits and projects going forward. So I would say that would be one area. Obviously, our debt schedule, we've always tried to keep a close eye on that. That's one thing. We have a very good bond rating, but that's the one area that brings us where we can't achieve the highest rating is our debt rate
Percentage,
capacity.
okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I'll open it up. Mr. Dwyer, do you have any questions?
I don't. I thought it was a very informative and well presented document. Thank you.
I know it can be a little dry.
Oh, no, it had the twist ending. So, Mr. Jeffries, do you have any questions?
I do not have any questions.
Mr. Franco?
I do not have any questions. Thank you for the presentation, and this is, of course, my first go-around on this stuff, too. So, thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, I thank you. It was an excellent presentation and good information. And for those people following, again, these are forecasts traditionally, because of the conservative nature of them, show deficits in the latter part of those years of the forecast. And as we do each year, again, there's things that can't be taken into consideration here because they're not very predictive over 2, 4, 5 years. But as you do the budgets each year, it's not like these are abnormal numbers. If you look back at financial forecasts over the years, these are pretty standard projected shortfalls given the assumptions from the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't want anybody to be, panicked about the whole thing. Okay, we go on to old business, request from legislators for fiscal priorities. So we've been working on this document. I think we have a document now that we should be able to agree upon, I hope. And that is the FY25 budget priorities that list our 4 priorities that we've talked about in the past. $330,000 for the Flat Hill Road culvert, $371,000 for hazardous materials abatement and demolition of the old primary school, $300,000 for the redevelopment of the property at 925 Mass Ave, and $100,000 for the senior center building improvements. One of the things I think we may add as a fifth, or just propose as a fifth, is something that came up this evening, and that would be the air conditioning, the $200 and some odd thousand dollars.
232.
Yeah,
$800.
$1,000 of the air conditioning at it's not, is it fully air conditioned or air?
It's AC.
It is AC, at the primary school. So I don't know how the other members feel about that. I certainly would be for putting it on here as a fifth priority. But I open it up. And just to round out the document, we asked the Parks Commissions, and they gave us 3 items, 2 to put on their list, which was $150,000 for a restroom facility improvements at Marshall Park, $25,000 for a Marshall Park survey, and $75,000 for the Northfield Park master plan and survey. So I'm fine with the document as it is. I would throw out there maybe adding a 5th item on the first part of the list. of that AC, but I will leave it to discussion for the board.
I'm personally all for adding the AC unit as a fifth item.
Yep.
I'm fine with the list otherwise.
Mr. Jeffries, any feeling one way or another?
Yeah, I support adding the AC as a fifth item.
Okay, and Mr. Franco?
Yes, absolutely support that as well.
Okay, so if we can just add that, and can we vote on it with that addition?
Yes, so the considerations for the park are not on the list then.
Well, I mean, I think we should put them on as a, I mean, I thought they were on the list, that's in the document here.
Yeah. So I think they're looking for, I mean, I asked, you know, was it limited to 4 projects during our meeting with the delegation? Rep. Kushmarek said top 5.
Yeah.
So I would say the most we would want. I could give them more than that.
Well,
I
first,
just-
I would say 2 things. First of all, they were clear, or he was clear, that in the earmarks process, they're looking for items that are 5-digit numbers or less. So only the 2 park ones are 5-digit numbers, you know, under $100,000. So there's no reason we can't put those 2 in the list. And if we, so they said choose the top 5, so we're gonna give them a list of priorities, and, you know, we could take one of the things out, I guess. You know, if we have grants at Mass Ave, we can supplant that, I guess. Because that's still, not really ready. But I would give them 6, so that's fine. So we can put 6 on.
All right.
Just to straighten out, this is my proposal, what I just said. We keep the culvert as number 1, hazardous materials number 2, move up the senior center building improvements as number 3, put 4, the AC at the schools, and then put items which are 2 and 3 from the parks, make those the last ones. And that way we'd have 6 in our list.
And that would remove the redevelop, number 3 as it stands now, redevelopment of 925.
Right, because I don't think we're ready for that right now. And we're looking for grants for that. That's what the town manager said. And the restroom facility improvements, again, that one wouldn't rise to the priority above any of the other ones. But the other 2 of the parks I'm putting in because I think those may be achievable numbers for earmarks, whereas the other ones may be too high. That's my concern. So if we give them 6 to choose from, it gives them options. That's my thinking. I'm open to, you know, obviously a discussion on it.
So you're taking out the redevelopment, doesn't that just leave 6? But you also do.
No, but, yeah, and we're taking out the
so
restroom
5.
facility of Marshall Park, taking out that one and putting in the school AC. That gives us 6.
Yes, I'm good with that.
Mr. Franco, did you follow that?
I think I did. You're taking out the 925 Mass Ave.
Right.
Putting the senior center improvements to number 3 and then the AC for the school to number 4, is that right?
Correct.
Okay, yeah,
And
no,
then 5
I
and
got
6,
it.
and then 5 and 6 would be what's listed number 2 and 3 at the bottom of that document for the parks.
Okay, I got it, yep. And I'm good with it.
Mr. Jeffries?
Yeah, I would like to keep the Parks Commission's number 1. Do we know for sure that this is a ranked list?
I asked the chairman that today, and she said that Northfield would be at the bottom. It would be the survey, then the improvements to the bathroom, restroom facilities, then Northfield.
Okay.
But I
and
don't.
then with that understanding, yeah, Mr. Alonso, I'm comfortable with your suggested changes.
Okay, so can we do that,
So-
Jay? Well, go ahead.
One thing I just want to bring up from our visit from our legislative delegation is they said repeatedly, we're never going to get anything if we don't ask for it.
Right.
So before we take, I don't have a problem pulling off the Mass Ave because we're not quite ready and we're looking for grant funding, but leaving everything else on there
I'm
because
fine with it
if we
too.
don't ask for it, we're never going to get it. The worst they can say is no.
Right. I'm for that. So we can leave the restroom facility improvement in Marshall Park on there too.
I can support that.
Okay, so let's just take out number 3, move up number 4 to number 3, put in AC for the schools as number 4, and then 5, 6, 7 are the
Parks.
as listed would be for the parks. And with that, unless there's some other discussion, I would entertain a motion that we approve that tonight so that the town manager can put together that list and get it to the delegation.
I move we approve the list of legislative priorities for fiscal year 2023 as enumerated by the chairman.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, Mr. Dwyer.
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries.
Aye.
Mr. Franco.
Aye.
And an aye for me. Excellent, thank you. Discussion on the capital plan, the financial forecast, and the annual town meeting warrant articles. This, again, is going to be a recurring one. I don't know, we just heard the financial forecast. Nobody had any questions. I don't know if anybody has any questions about the other 2 items on here right now. Mr. Jeffries.
Yes. I have a couple of questions about the capital plan. So first, I want to, excuse me. First, I just wanted to bring up the AC in the school system, at the primary school. So after learning about the discussion at the school committee meeting last week, I reached out to Dr. Burnham to ask her if I could go and just get a quick walk around of the primary school. And the reason for the request was, as all of you know from me saying this probably all the time, is that I manage property, and I advised her that I would be able to identify pretty quickly going into the building if there was a critical need for air conditioning, or if this was kind of just nice to have. So the result of that walkthrough, it's in a summary real quick. You know, the building was designed to be an energy efficient construction design. It's, you know, the standard is this LEED, LEED, LEED kind of certified building. So the design of the building was meant to do a couple of things. It was meant to really kind of conserve heating cost in the wintertime. And they do that through incorporating a lot of large windows, in upper portions of the building, a lot of tall rooms with fans that then take that hot air that accumulates at the ceiling and blows it back down. You know, kind of this open concept in some ways designed to allow air to move more freely throughout the building and really take advantage during the winter months of natural light. And you can see these design elements really throughout the entire space. The impact of pulling out the air conditioning system in the final phases of getting this cost down really has been bad for the building and the inhabitants. You know, what happens is the second floor of that building is almost like an attic, and it creates an attic-like feel. And so working on that second floor by that design, it was very uncomfortable when I was there in the morning during the morning warm-up. And I can only imagine what it's like in the middle of the summer. The beginning of the summer or the end of the summer. So it seems, you know, also another thing was, you know, going into some of the larger spaces where you see these large windows, what you look for is the impact of heat, too much heat being in a space, and how that strains a building. And the library is showing those strains. Primarily in the library area, where you look around the windows, you see that the caulking is kind of retracting a bit. You can tell that they're losing some of their energy efficiency around their windows in the larger rooms. And it's because of the buildup of heat and humidity and just the impact that has. It's pretty clear that adding in an air conditioning system in that space is necessary, that it's immediate, it's an urgent kind of issue. And I do understand, again, the real thought that I want to impress upon everyone is it feels like an attic working in there. And if anyone has gone in their attic, even in the summertime, it's not very comfortable, especially when there's no cooling. So it seemed as if the building was designed to also have supplemental air conditioning. So there's going to be spaces that are going to, even with a air handle system, there are going to be spaces in the building that still need additional supplemental cooling. Some of these would be, for example, this would be some of those spaces on the second floor. This would also be in your server rooms. The building, all those supplemental air conditioning systems were left in the design, so those are still there. But the kind of way to think about this is, it's kind of like having heat in your house and then planning to have a heated basement and taking out your entire boiler system, but leaving electrical baseboard heaters in your basement. You really can't use them for heat, you know, and that's the equivalent of what the air conditioning system is like there. They have this supplemental system, but without the primary system working, it really is not functional. So I would urge a reprioritization of that. I would urge that perhaps with some reshuffling of numbers, that we find a way to fund that through this year's capital plan. So that's my lengthy commentary on that. The rest I have are questions. So the first is I want to hit just a couple of things that were on the capital plan, 5 or 6 items. The first thing was a tractor. That one of the plans was to purchase a tractor for $170,000. And so a couple questions for this one is, when was the current tractor purchased? And what was the cost to purchase it at that time?
That was purchased in 2020 for $162,000.
Okay, so we purchased this, you said
$162,000.
So $162,000 that was spent in 2020.
Yeah.
Why won't that piece of equipment work for the purpose that it's needed, that this new item's needed?
So the trackless piece of equipment is primarily used for sidewalk, removing snow on sidewalks, as well as it has a cold planing attachment to it. So they use that for berms and milling for pavement. The flail arm was the original flail arm from the old 2008 trackless piece of equipment, and it has completely failed. It's been repaired a number of times. I think it's a point where it can't be welded anymore. Also, that flail arm on that size tractor is the piece of equipment isn't large enough to handle the size growth that they're doing on roadside mowing. So it's meant more like a roadside mowing for grass versus the small trees and growth that they have to use it for. So it really beats up the machine if used on that size piece of equipment.
Would the new product do all the functions of the old product?
I don't think it could be used as a, you mean the rotary mower?
Yeah, what's being proposed for this new $170,000? Could this machine do everything that the $162,000 machines do?
No, I don't think it could plow the sidewalks.
No, it's not designed. The answer is no, because it's not designed to. What we were doing with the trackless was we were using it for something it really wasn't designed to do and was underpowered to do. Mm-hmm. However, we don't have any other thing to do the sidewalks except the trackless. So the answer to that question is no, they're not. The new purchase won't replace the other one. The other one will be put to use for what it was designed to be used for from the outset.
Yeah, and that piece of equipment was its primary use is snow removal for the sidewalks. We have about 6 miles of sidewalks in town that the DPW does through the center of town, all of Whalum and Summer Street. So that was the primary use, and that's why that piece of equipment, our previous piece of equipment, was no longer able to be used.
The new mower for $170,000, or the new tractor for $170,000, as I remember the presentation, the focus was on the sides of the roads,
right,
and how this would be helpful to clear off what has been kind of one of my complaints about the sides of the roads. So my understanding is that we're currently contracting this service out for $20,000 a year. So I'm not fully understanding why we're looking at a $170,000 piece of equipment that's going to come with time and material to, what's come with labor cost to operate. And, what kind of return on investment are we looking at versus what we're getting through contracted services?
So I can send this out to the board. The DPW director did do cost analysis on a return on investment. That cost for contractors based on the return of investment would be 6 years. It cost us, the town about $16,241 to operate versus $45,000 for a contractor. So, and the expected life cycle, say, is 20 years, 15 to 20 years of that piece of equipment.
No, that catches me a little bit. I thought we've only spent 20 grand recently on contractors. How are we at 45?
I can find that question out. This is what was provided to me for analysis.
Okay.
One of the things I can say at the presentation to the Capital Planning Committee was that when we're contracting, we are also we're doing the high emergency areas, the things that absolutely need to be done, and so therefore they're not proactive. If we had the equipment, we could send out crews to keep things instead of waiting to them to be line of sight problematic. We could do things more because we have the equipment and we have the personnel. So on off times, we could send somebody to do more of the side trimming than we do currently with contracting, because we have to be cognizant of how much whatever we're budgeting, how much that covers.
Yeah. So his estimate includes, if contracted out 30 hours per week for 3 months, that same time frame for a contractor at $125 an hour is what was paid last summer for. And what you may be thinking, because I don't think we contracted for the whole fiscal year, it was for the period of time that our machine wasn't being able to be used that we had to contract that out.
Okay. That's helpful. That's helpful information. My next question is on the K-9 unit for the police department. I think that I think we all understand the value of K-9s in our community, and I certainly support having a K-9 in our community. Can you explain, though, the cost as they were presented was $8,500 for an untrained dog. Can you explain that one a little bit more?
So that is the cost for a canine, given the breed, the bloodline, and the organization that the police department would purchase the canine from. And that is what Sergeant Tashi was one that did this research on that, and that's what that going cost for a canine are.
Okay. And then the breakdown of the training and equipment was an additional $15,750. Would you mind just, do we have a breakdown of what that includes?
Yes, includes 14 weeks for patrol certification, which includes searching for persons, 8 weeks for drug search certification. For the equipment, includes a kennel, because the dog is stored at the handler's residence, bulletproof vest, the handling equipment, which is leashes, harnesses, collars, exercise equipment, bite sleeve, and the training equipment for the drug search equipment for the canine.
Okay. So that's helpful. So what you said, and I want to recap to make sure I understand what you've explained, is that the canine dogs are coming from a very specific kind of lineage, and so you're paying for that, and that's one part of why the dogs themselves are so costly compared to your typical German Shepherd. And then the other part of this is that once you have the dog, then you have it enrolled in a 14-week program, and that there's additional safety equipment for the dog. And so that's how we get to the $24,000 roughly total.
Yes.
Okay. Next question is related to rubberized undercoatings on vehicles in general. So this is general. This is a service I mentioned at a previous meeting that a lot of towns and communities do. It prolongs the life of vehicles. Also, many companies do, especially companies that plow, because it stops a lot of that rust that would happen from the salt kicking back under the undercarriage. Do we currently rubberize any other coatings of our vehicles in any of our fleets? And if not, why was it decided that that's not a beneficial thing?
Currently, we do not. The PD responded that they have not had a problem with undercarriage rot, except for one 2008 Crown Victoria that they sold at the auction. And the DPW director will explore this for the future.
Okay, that's good. Next thing is about the 1-ton dump truck with a plow for $58,000. Do we know how many miles are on that vehicle?
Approximately 78,000.
So replacing a vehicle with 78,000 miles on it. And do we have a history of repairs?
That I can look into that. That wasn't one of your questions.
I know it wasn't. So,
but I'm sure the town mechanic can provide that. And there were additional photos added to that slide, and the presentation is up on the town website under the news and announcements.
Thank you. I will go back through that and take a look. Off the cuff, I mean, a vehicle with 78,000 miles on it, I don't know if it doesn't have, if it's not getting repaired. I mean, I don't know if it's really primed for replacement, but I do understand.
I think we also have, can I just add to that, is you also have to consider that by the time we actually get the replacement vehicle, it's going to be more than a year out. We are in the beginning of February. They can't order the truck until July. And right now we're having problems with delivery of vehicles that we've ordered for the fiscal 22 capital plan due to what everyone's experiencing with vehicles.
Supply chain, right?
Supply chain issues. So by the time we actually get a replacement vehicle for this truck, it's probably going to be a significant amount more mileage on it.
Okay. My next question is about the mower.
Before we continue, I mean, how many questions do we have? And are these questions that need to be addressed now live? My understanding is you submitted these to the town manager, right?
You got them as well.
Yeah. Well, I'm saying that, yes, I know I got them. My point is, can these answers be given to you, or do we need to do this on TV for any particular reason of revamp? This is a pretty voluminous number of questions about the capital plan.
I think that as you look, there's 2 more items I have to question, and I think it's appropriate for the topic. I understand it's late in the evening, but I think it's appropriate for the topic to ask questions about the capital plan.
Go ahead.
So going to the mower, one of the comments on the mower for $48,000 was that there have been substantial repair costs recently. What have those repair costs been over the last couple of years?
That I have asked the school facilities director for. But those, the parts that aren't readily available, which they're having problem getting, is that related to the hydraulics.
Okay. And then the last question is about the police F-150. So, and a couple questions here. So this vehicle was presented on the capital plan is, the primary purpose of it was to be able to tow some vehicles that we have in the fleet, and then also to be able to transport snow blowers. So my questions on this are, do we have any vehicles currently in the fleet that are not 4-wheel drive?
All our SUVs are all-wheel drive.
How do we currently pull our utility trailer and our boat?
They're pulled with the Tahoes, because those have tow hitches on them.
Okay. And then, my last question is about, most plow companies use a tow hitch attachment. And it's, in my question, I also sent you a link To an example of that, I think on the higher end, they're about $600, and on the lower end, they're about $150. Why is that not a good solution to be able to transport a snow blower?
The information I got from the police chief was that the weight of the utility vehicle is 3,100 pounds, and the trailer used to tow is rated at 5,100 pounds. And the Tahoes, like I said, tow the trailers in the boat. They also tow a firearms trailer that they use to bring equipment to the range. So I think, especially the hybrids, they would not be ideal to tow any of the trailers because they're at their maximum tow limits with the trailers and equipment.
How many vehicles, this isn't on, you mentioned something about the electric vehicle. I mean, are half or more of the vehicles over there electrical vehicles?
No,
just regular?
no, just that's the last, so last year and this year's capital plan were hybrids.
Okay, but the rest of the vehicles in the fleet that are four-wheel drive, the Tahoes with tow hitch
All-wheel
attachment.
drive,
All-wheel drive?
yeah.
Okay. All right. And so my comment then is I'm not sure if I think that the explanations are for every other item I get. I hope that we can revisit the necessity of an F-150 because, what we're doing is we're adding to our fleet. And I understand that as we increase police officers, we need to get more vehicles. But, adding a F-150, adding in a new $170-something thousand tractor, that these become vehicles that at a future point we then have to replace. And so I think on this side of it, I think one of what I'm struggling with is a larger issue, as I noted in my email, and thank you for looking into these questions. The larger issue I brought up last week, which is that we're leaving $2 million in unfunded capital requests, and that we just had a conversation with all of our residents at our town meeting that said, hey, all of our building costs are going up for construction, 30% for renovation, 30% cost increase over there. We did a presentation that demonstrated that construction costs increase at a rate that's almost double regular CPI. And then we push off most of the requests that come in for capital are facility related and they're not funded. And so 93% of what's unfunded and what's left on the table are all facility related things. Those facility related things are going to increase as far as what it costs to resolve them at an exponential rate compared to everything else. So, I understand that there's a lot of diligence that goes into the process and that there's a formula that comes from a very educated school of thought into the approach that the committee has taken. And I have no doubt that there was very deliberate in that process. But I think the result here is not a path that I think we need to keep going down. So I would hope that we can look at trying to recalculate or revisit some of these items in the budgeting process.
Can I just add on, because I brought this or responded to that same question that was repeated about facilities at the Finance Committee meeting, discussion with the capital plan. So if we look at our total facilities request for fiscal '23, it totaled $2,646,861. We, in the proposed plan as it stands now for fiscal '23 to be funded, is $576,661, and total not to be funded is $2,070,200. If we take out the TCP project and the Brooks projects from that totals $884,000. And if we take that new total as a percentage of what's being funded, we're funding 40% of our facilities requests. Just everything I think needs context when you're talking about situations. So I think providing different perspectives on how to look at what's being funded is important.
Yeah, I think by my calculations was at 36, but you just said it was 40. I don't know if that's a really significant gain and a different viewpoint, but I think the point of it is still the same, that we still have millions of dollars in capital needs that we don't have a plan to fund. And and resolving these things are going to cost us a lot of money, a lot more than the vehicles that may be on back order for a year. But I do, again, appreciate the effort that's gone into this and hope that we can reevaluate some of this.
Thank you. Okay, next item. 30 School Street Certificate to Alter Application Status. So, where to start with this? I was hoping we weren't going to get to this at 10:09 tonight, but let's look at the timeline. The timeline of this is the problematic part. This board voted to submit the intention to demo the old primary school on 30 School Street. And that form we used was the demo delay determination form, October 27th, 2021. It was an email sent to the chair of the APDC informing him of the submittal, and that was copied to our building inspector, to our land use director, and the select board. Not hearing anything by December 13th, the land use director reached out to a member, the two members, is Cullen the co-chair, the vice chair?
At one point, he was the chair, and Richard was the vice chair. Now with the roles, during this time frame, the roles have reversed.
So they're the chair and vice chair of the APDC to request about the status of the form. On December 15th, the land use director received an email from the vice chair informing him that the incorrect form had been submitted. This is now 6 weeks after the submittal. 6 weeks that we've submitted the wrong form, and we were supposed to submit the certificate to alter. So on December 30th, not saying anything, not making a big deal of it, we submitted the certificate to alter on December 30th of this year to the APDC through the land use office and to the town clerk, and sent via email to the select board. The email was sent by the planning board admin to the APDC containing the certificate to alter and informing them that a hearing will be required and offering assistance for the hearing. On January 7th, we received an email from the chair of the APDC stating that reviewing the application on this, they will be reviewing the application on the January 6th, and they needed to speak to town council. We were not indicated, I don't think why, but they just wanted to review. On January 9th, the APDC posted on Facebook that they had received the certificate to alter from the select board and that the application had not been accepted or not been fully accepted. There was a dispute about whether it was complete, and the town offices were notified sometime after that of the posting, not that they contacted us, but that there was a posting on Facebook about this.
And it wasn't, yeah, just to clarify, I learned at a finance committee meeting about the Facebook posting.
Okay.
That's how we were
Thank you.
notified.
On January 19th, we sent an email to the vice chair asking why the select board office had not been notified formally of the incomplete application and a copy not sent to the town manager. The town manager followed up on the email, noting that the APDC guidelines state that the select board should have been notified within 5 days of submittal whether the application was considered complete, and we were not. Also on January 19th, the land use director reached out to the vice chair and the chair of the APDC via email offering assistance with getting the hearing scheduled and advertised and noting the deadline date of February 12th. On January 27th, we received a response from the vice chair of the APDC apologizing for the oversight on the part of the APDC in not notifying us, and that the APDC could not come to agreement on whether the application was complete. That's why they were still seeking an opinion from town council. Also on January 27th, the town manager sent an email to the vice chair and chair of the APDC noting the bylaw requirement to act on the application and holding a hearing within 45 days of the receipt of the application. Just yesterday, we received an email from the chair to the town manager and the select board chair, myself, stating that incorrectly stating that the demo delay form, the initial form, was submitted in December, and that the form was returned to the select board office. He also stated that the certificate to alter was incomplete and intended to make a motion at their next hearing, which is this Thursday, stating that the certificate to alter is incomplete. This is the timeline that our office assembled of this for an application for something that was known to them and the general public of what the intent was back on October 27th. Here we are, November, December, January. 3 months later, we haven't even slated a hearing, and we hear on public media, social media about these, and I will say without any hesitation that this is completely unacceptable. Okay, we cannot have town boards and committees not acting responsibly and communicating. In this case, it's us, but it could have been any applicant to this, and not communicating with us and not following bylaws about what's happening. And we have to find out about this on social media, not from any private correspondence, from the commission itself. It was very clear from the beginning what we wanted to do, and if these submissions were handled promptly, then we would have been notified. If something is incorrect, I'm more than happy to have us correct the problem. But initially, it took 6 weeks for them to tell us we filed the wrong form. The reason being, we were told that somebody was having a problem with their town email and they didn't check their mailbox here, but that is completely inexcusable. As an official in town, whether appointed or elected, you have a responsibility to perform the duties that you are asked to do, and 6 weeks delay is not acceptable. Now, if that was alone the problem, I would have no issue. But then we submitted it, and again, we're in the same position. So we submitted it on December 30th. We are now 5 weeks later, or thereabouts, until their hearing, and we still haven't found out, and they didn't notify us immediately. If there was problems with or deficiencies in the submission, we should have been notified how to correct them immediately, not 5 weeks later. So I take great exception to this and great frustration, and notably, as my tone probably is clear, a little bit angry at the way this has been approached in this regard. I can only hope that our residents aren't treated like this when they submit requests the same, but we need to have more prompt responses from this, and their own procedures and bylaws need to be followed. We have to have some kind of notice. The planning board, the conservation commission, all have notifications if you submit something about how long it takes them to respond and how long it takes them to respond if the submission is not complete. When we do our right of first refusal on property coming out of chapter, have a deadline of how long we have to act to say that the application is complete or not. And it's not 6 weeks. So we will be asking for them, and I think we already have. We need to know what the deficiencies are, and so we can resubmit this. But this will be noted when it comes time to review what these policies are and who is enforcing these policies. So I will open it up to the board. I wanted to give the public and the board the timeline of what's happening with that. And just to be clear, we want to make sure that we have been very upfront about what our intentions are as a board. We have made it known at town meetings, at our own meetings. So this is, everything we've done has been right above board doing this and very transparent. And we know that they have been clearly stating that they are not for what we're trying to do, and I appreciate that in their role. And while I don't project any intent, it does look from the sidelines that this could have been avoided, and it does look suspicious at best. Now, again, I want to be clear, I'm not projecting intent that this was done intentionally, but the fact that they're adamantly against it and they have not, when invited, have not participated in how to commemorate that building in some of the plans, even when invited here, for the landscape architect, it does look suspicious about foot dragging in this. And so, again, I just want to voice my displeasure with how this whole thing is handled, and we will not, whatever we find out the deficiencies are, we will correct, and we will expect a prompt hearing from them and a prompt decision on this once it's done. And we would expect communication at every level if anything else is needed from us in a couple of days' time, not several weeks' time. With that being said, I will open it up to the board if anybody has any other comments they would like to make.
Michael Ray has his hand
Michael
raised.
Ray.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for those comments. I echo your sentiments. What I want to add, I think you were very clear in what you have expressed. That timeline is outrageous. What I want to add, though, is when you look at what the Architectural Preservation District is supposed to be, what they're not supposed to be is an advocacy group for much of anything. And when you go onto Facebook and you look up Lunenburg Architectural Preservation District, what you find is a posting that they created this group, and on January the 13th, they posted a photo of the old primary school, and the only caption is, "Don't let this historic building be demolished." I think that when any of us get into these roles of public service, we have to be able to separate ourselves, our own wants and needs, from what we raise our hand and take an oath to do. And the oath of what the Architectural Preservation District is supposed to be doing is spelled out in our bylaws. They're supposed to be reviewing applications for changes to people's homes or structures within the Architectural Preservation District. They're not an advocacy group. That is not their role. And so when if you are a resident and they also have this false presumption that nothing can ever be torn down. When the entire language of the Architectural Preservation District speaks to, and their whole role is to speak to how you can make alterations to buildings that are consistent with a certain design type look. It does not say that buildings forever get to exist because they hit a certain age. It does not mean that everything that's 75 years old is a contributing structure, as they have interpreted it to mean. And so if you're a private resident and the Architectural Preservation District is posting photos of your house online saying this needs to be preserved, what kind of fair shot do you think you have of getting a fair hearing in front of them? To me, this is beyond just they don't agree. This has now crossed the line and gone into activities and behaviors that are fully unacceptable from anyone who's in any kind of governmental role. So, my opinion here is I see where you're at, Mr. Chair, and I'm probably a little beyond that. I think that we need to send a reminder to all the membership there that we have a social media policy that they are clearly not in compliance with, and a reminder of what their job and what their duties by bylaw actually are. And what they're doing is just not consistent with that.
Anybody else?
And as a final note, everything on their Facebook page just about is about the Architectural Preservation District, because this page wasn't even created until after we submitted this application. First post came up literally a week after we submitted this application. And the whole thing's committed for the most part to the old primary school.
Yep.
So my personal opinion on this, after having read through the timeline, is that initially we submitted a demolition delay determination form on October 27th. Within 5 days of that, they should have said, you had the wrong form, resubmit it, and we're scheduling your hearing, and we expect the completed form to be sent shortly after. Can we say October 27th? In the bylaws, it says if you have 90 days without any action, they forfeit the right to do that. I think we're in that category. I think that we can forego it because they've due to their inaction, they've made the determination that we can move forward with the demolition. I'd like the town council to weigh in on that.
Well, I don't, and we can. I don't I hear where you're going, and one of the ways I think we get there is I think we need to review what the bylaws are to make sure that there are set timelines and that we put things in like that. I mean, if somebody submits something and it is duly noted by the town clerk or accepted it wherever it has to be accepted at, their inaction is up to them. And I agree with you, Mr. Dwyer, that, you know, we should make sure that whoever makes such a submission gets prompt responses. And if something is incomplete, there's X amount of time. And if X amount of time goes by, it's going to be deemed that it's been approved unless somebody acts. And we need them to act. And so, you know, there needs to be a chain of notification, and we need to review this and maybe even put an article on town meeting for this town meeting to make these kind of modifications, to put in, with help of town council, to put in some of these deadlines to make sure that these things are handled expediently. I don't think they need to be handled overnight, but again, they have to be handled a little bit closer for submissions than, 6 weeks, that's for sure. So I would agree with you on wanting to review that. I don't think, in this case, I don't think we can say that it was forfeited, because there's nothing in the bylaw that says that. It doesn't say anything. Mr. Franco, did you want to weigh in on this?
Yeah, I generally agree. I think what Mr. Alonso, you and Mr. Jeffrey said just about sums it up. But I just, in fairness, or just, for the purpose of intellectual honesty, I can't open the email. I can't open the email right now. But if I recall, one of the it wasn't just the wrong form, if I remember correctly, but was it submitted to the wrong place?
No,
initially?
it was the wrong form to the right group. A demo delay application would go normally to the historical commission, but because this is in the village, in the center district, it goes to the APDC. Because it's in the APD, it goes to the APD, but they don't deal with demo delays. This was discussed at town meeting. They deal with certificates to alter.
Right, okay, yes, right, okay.
So we were using the historical commission form and submitting it to the APDC, and that's what they said, well, we don't use that form, you gotta fill out this other form.
Yeah,
So,
that's, okay.
so for those people who are familiar at home, and I'm sure most people are, although I don't know how many people are watching at 10:30, it was the equivalent of getting RMV'd. We got RMV'd. Whatever forms you bring, you didn't have the right forms. So the registry of motor vehicle, that's exactly what they did. So you stand in line for an hour to find out that you would have the wrong form anyway, and you got to go back out of the line.
That's all I have. I think everything that needs to be said was said, so.
Okay. Well, we're gonna, again, this will be important for us to take up at other opportunities, but certainly we want to consider what Mr. Dwyer said of reviewing what the current bylaw is, and if their procedures, if their policies and procedures follow the bylaw, because one of the things that may be noted is that in a cursory review, our town council indicated it's possible that they are making more strict rules than the bylaw is allowing, and that is questionable whether that is allowed. So we need to review this, but especially when people have to be notified what the calendar is and what the, I don't want to say statutory, but what the bylaw deadlines of submissions to responses have to be, so that anybody submitting the application moves along, or they get notified that it's not complete. Are we all okay with this subject?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, current business. So can we postpone the representatives, or does anybody want to deal with this tonight? The Select Board, MRPC representative, and school committee liaisons. Does anybody want to volunteer for that, or do we want to just put that off to another meeting?
Let's put it off.
Put it off to another meeting, all right. Signatures for an amended change of manager license for Ixtapa. So I guess there was some deficiencies in the application for a change of manager. I guess the name used and the name that was on The official documentation of identification of the manager were not the same, so this has been resubmitted.
Yes.
And the proper paperwork is now here with the proper name. It's all in our drive, so I would entertain a motion regarding approving this amended change of manager license for Ixtapa Cantina.
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All's in favor, Mr. Dwyer,
Aye.
Mr. Franco,
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries,
Aye.
and an aye from me. Okay, so you guys on Zoom, please come in and sign this when you sign the car dealership. Approval of minutes for December 21st and January 4th. Are there any changes that need to be made? If not, I would entertain a motion regarding those two minutes. Sets of minutes.
I move to approve the minutes of December 21st and January 4th.
Actually, hold on,
as
Mr. Franco. Hold on, Mr. Franco. I think that you can't, you weren't here for one of them.
Oh, okay. I'll stay out of this one. I forgot.
No, let's do them separately. So you were not at December 21st.
Correct.
So
Yes.
make a motion for January 4th then.
All right, I moved to accept the minutes for the January 4th meeting as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor, Mr. Dwyer?
Aye.
Mr. Franco?
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries?
Aye.
And an aye for me. Now, would one of the other remaining members make a motion regarding the minutes of December 21st, 2021?
I move to accept the minutes of December 21st, 2021 as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, all those in favor, Mr. Dwyer?
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries?
Aye.
And an aye for myself, Mr. Franco was not.
I'll abstain. Yep, I'll go on
Yes.
the record as abstaining.
Yep. Along with those minutes, by the way, in reviewing those minutes, I realized that was the 12/21 meeting was the On the Rocks hearing, and we are
Yeah.
still waiting for them. Can we remind them that we've asked for a written report detailing the remedial measures that are going to be taken to avoid the violations?
They said the email that they sent was that
Okay.
response.
Okay.
I just want to let you know that I watched that meeting on the TV. You know, I wasn't feeling well. I just kind of felt like I was there. All right.
Okay, well, then, I don't know if that's a good feeling or a bad feeling.
Yes.
All right, warrants, we have accounts payable in the amount of $538,316.05. Some more things for you good gentlemen to sign. Payroll deductions in the amount of $615,880.04. And the payroll warrant in the amount of $902,669.83. Any action items from anybody? No. Okay. Any committee reports? Mr. Dwyer, any committee reports?
Met with the Stormwater Committee, I believe it was last week or the week before. We had a meeting. Was it last week?
They're all
2
running.
weeks. Yeah.
Yeah, 2 weeks.
And we had a good meeting, and we're gonna, they're gonna be on the agenda for the next meeting,
Next
I
week.
believe, to provide an update to this board.
Excellent. Mr. Franco, any committee reports?
Economic Development Committee meeting of January 27th was canceled for lack of a quorum. Next meeting will be February 24th.
Okay. Mr. Jeffries, any committee reports?
Yep. Library met. They reviewed their draft budget. Mira presented the draft budget, and they reviewed it and discussed it. There's a couple of requests for increases. The notable thing to mention here is that their membership in CW Mars is going to increase most substantially. It's by about $7,000. And that's because their membership changes from kind of this junior level to a full membership. And this was an expected cost increase. And the rest were related to increasing staffing costs and then the costs, increasing staffing costs to be open on Fridays. They also talked about, and I thought this was rather funny, they also talked about the removal of a children's book, Hookers and Blow Save Christmas. So this was a book that was ordered for the library. It's a children's book about a tow truck and a snowblower that saved Christmas with a rather cheeky name. So there was a complaint that came in to remove the book from the collection, and before that process was initiated fully, it was identified by one of the selectors who selected this book that they made an error. And so the selector said that this shouldn't have been purchased, so the decision was made on that level, and so it didn't go through the regular process. It was removed from the collection initially. And then and that was the highlights of that meeting. And then we also had just a quick meeting with the Municipal Building Design Committee. That committee met. We also changed our meeting dates from Wednesdays to first and third Mondays. That was just a better time for everyone. There was kind of mixed feelings about the charge, the rewritten charge, I will say. I think that maybe one or two members were full-fledged on board with it, and I think the rest needed some clarification. And so hopefully our discussion was able to clarify what the purpose of the charge is, but we'll have a follow-up meeting coming up next week.
Thank you. And
that's it.
The Finance Committee met last week. I did not get through the whole thing, but I know there was a large section of it was talking about the capital plan, especially as it pertains to the AC on the primary school, as was talked about tonight at two different areas of the meeting tonight. So that's the only report I have. Capital planning, while it has been talked about indirectly, we don't have another meeting scheduled. If enough of this bubbles up to the chair, maybe we will have another meeting to talk about reinvestigating or reviewing some of the decisions that were made there. But right now there is no such meeting planned. Okay, upcoming meetings. So we have a meeting next Tuesday. Mr. Jeffries will chair that. I will not be here next week. And then, of course, we have a meeting on the 15th. That's our final meeting of the month, is February 15th. Any public comment from the public? Mr. Passios.
Yes, good evening. Dave Passios, 56 Whiting Street. I'll be speaking as a citizen of the town of Lunenburg. Although for transparency, I am on the Capital Planning Committee. My comments this evening are as a citizen and having perspective on the last 4 decades of this town and its municipal government. Specifically, the bylaw, the charter, as it has been created and reviewed and altered over the past couple of decades. Previous to a charter form of government, capital planning was done through individual articles at town meeting, which were susceptible to cherry picking and individual personal opinions, which did not include the context that we go through today. And that's why the charter specifically spells out how capital planning is handled by the Capital Planning Committee. The committees have done their due diligence, including this year, and taking these items out of context without knowing all of the due diligence that we went through to prioritize these are why that process was put in place. And a $1 amount is brought to town meeting in the article to approve capital planning. What's been going on for the last week or two is a prime example of what was deemed needed to be avoided when that charter change was made, and that was 2 charters ago. It was not changed in the last charter review because it's a process that works. Finally, and I'll be very briefly, the one major project that's up for question, I personally would totally support it if it was brought forward in its original form with its original dollar amount. I won't go into all of the details, but a major piece of the project recommended by the engineers in their original recommendation that we paid for as taxpayers, recommended an upgrade of an electrical system that by their calculations is not sufficient to take on the AC system as well as what's already hooked to that system. If we move forward with this without the electrical upgrade, then we're setting up the new primary building on Mass Ave for the same problems that the TC Passios building has now. If you plug in too many items into the outlets, you blow a circuit. That is what we're setting the new primary building up for on Mass Ave. So that was one of the reasons that I did not support it. Secondly, I reached out to other area towns and got recommendations from them as to how they deal with their special needs kids needing tempered air. And the 2 towns that I spoke with, they use split systems and they move them around from year to year as needed. I don't disagree that the building probably should have, and it's not air conditioning, it's air, I forget the terminology, but it's air tempering. It's not actually an air conditioning system. It's going to maintain a 70 some odd degree temperature with lower humidities. I think it's a good upgrade for the building, but it needs to be done correctly. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comments from the public? Any public comment from the board?
None.
Mr. Jeffries?
Yeah, this should have been an action item, actually. It's just, or committee report. So it's just a follow-up that both Mary Foyle at the high school, this is a teacher, and Lisa LeBlanc, we are trying to coordinate some dates to go speak with students. And so what I'll do after this meeting is I'll send to the town manager. Lou and I have been coordinating on this, so I'll send some dates out to the town manager to distribute. If Tom, if you or Todd are interested in joining some classes, there's a couple of dates that there's some availability to come speak to civics classes, either in the 8th grade or in the high school, with Ms. Foyles for the high school, about, really about local government and how it works and our engagement in what we're doing.
I am interested. I've done them in the past. So if you or Lou can't make some of the dates or doesn't work out, I'd be more than happy if my schedule allows to participate in that. And I will let Mr. Dwyer speak for himself.
Yeah, I'm happy to serve as a backup if you or Mr. Franco can't attend. But I think 4 of us in one classroom would be overkill.
No, I think there should only be 1 in a class.
Right.
I don't think we need more than 1, but if there's coverage, yeah, if you have 2,
Right.
that's just not going to be overkill. But if there are coverages that we can't make, then we're both available. Just let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can cover all the classes. I think that there's an interest in, if you want to also come in a separate day, there's an opportunity for either of you to also do that.
I'll leave it up to, Ms. Foyle and whoever's running the civics classes on those schools, what they need. But I'd be more than happy to participate.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Okay, we do have executive session, that not to return to open session. So we need a motion to enter into executive session and to adjourn after exiting executive session pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section 21, Paragraph 3, to discuss strategy with respect to collective bargaining if an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position of the public body, and the chair so declares. We'll be discussing the clerical and the police union contracts.
Move to,
I'm going to say so moved.
so moved.
Do I have a second?
Enthusiastically seconded.
All right, roll call, Mr. Dwyer.
Aye.
And Mr. Franco.
Aye.
Mr. Jeffries.
Aye.
And an aye from me, so good night, everyone. Keep yourselves warm, keep yourselves safe, and take care of yourselves and take care of each other. We'll talk to you next week. Good night.
Recording stopped.